Good morning. It is, of course, now Wednesday, the 15th of July, and we have got some great guests for you today. We've got Stephen Barrett coming up very shortly. Lee Harris is here, Chris Rose, Gawain Towler, Kane Blackwell, Laura Perrins, Connor Tomlinson. Howard Cox is going to be here talking to us as well, because we've got a big story today to tell you about, which has nothing to do with what has been in the news recently, but of course it's all about driving and roads, because guess what? The Department of Transport have said, wouldn't it be a good idea if we made all of the roads in Britain, particularly the country roads in Britain, 20 miles an hour? Goodness gracious me. So we'll be talking about that and ranting about it a little bit. But first of all, obviously we have to start off with the Anne Widdecombe story, which is still rumbling and doing some ridiculous things now, because clearly the police, who we said yesterday have completely cocked up this investigation, have now decided that after saying on Sunday that there was no political motivation for the attack, that there was no suggestion of terrorism, they're now saying that the suspect involved in the killing of Anne Widdecombe, the murder of Anne Widdecombe last week, may have actually had a list of MPs that he wanted to murder, that he was driven by left-wing extremism, and that in fact he may have been a far more dangerous individual than anybody ever knew, which is a pretty interesting position to have suddenly come to after all this time. Because, of course, the murder was committed on Wednesday of last week. Anne Widdecombe was discovered dead on Thursday. On Friday, they arrested the wrong man. On Saturday, they arrested the current suspect, but said that it wasn't political. So, shall we play the first clip for the day, Charlotte, of our man who is now in charge? I think his name is Lawrence Taylor. He's now in charge of the investigation, because he is now counter-terror police here in London. So, let's have a look.
I'm here to provide you an update on a case that has very much dominated the headlines since the first news broke last week of the shocking death of Anne Widdecombe. Firstly, as you will understand, this incident has had a deeply distressing impact on Miss Widdecombe's family, and we're doing all we can to support them alongside our colleagues in Devon and Cornwall. The thoughts of everybody at counter-terrorism policing are with them at what is a very challenging time. As we confirmed yesterday, Counter-Terrorism South East are now leading the investigation into the death of Anne Widdecombe. This is due to new information and evidence coming to light following the arrest of a 28-year-old man on Saturday in South Yorkshire. I know there will be lots of questions about what that new information is, but this is a live investigation, so I'm limited on the details that I can give. However, it is clear that this was a targeted attack. We are still working to understand the extent of any planning or preparation and the motivation that sits behind that attack. And I do not want to comment further on this at this stage of our inquiries. Extensive searches have taken place at an address in Rotherham, and scenes remain in place as that activity continues. We have also been granted a warrant of further detention, which means the suspect can now be held for questioning for up to 7 days under the Terrorism Act. He remains under arrest on suspicion of commission, preparation or instigation of acts of terrorism, as well as on suspicion of murder.
So that's Lawrence Taylor, who is now the man in charge of the Anne Widdecombe murder inquiry. Relatives have apparently described the suspect, who still has not been named in the papers, as reclusive. He lived alone with his dog after his father, who was an amputee, died around Christmas time. One relative said he had not attended the wedding of his older brother, who was understood to have served in the armed forces, and neighbours said he was rarely seen leaving his home. But of course, there are more pictures of him that have been published over the course of time, because there's apparently CCTV cameras around where he lived in Rotherham. It looks as though now Assistant Commissioner Lawrence Taylor, the National Head of Counter-Terrorism Policing, said police are trying to understand the motive. However, he has been rearrested on suspicion of the commission, preparation and instigation of acts of terrorism. So you have to ask a couple of questions again here, don't you? How is it possible that Devon and Cornwall police can be so inept How is it possible that Devon and Cornwall police could come out and say something which was clearly untrue? Now, either they're so incompetent that they don't know things have actually happened, or they're so wrapped up with the idea of being politically correct that they want to try and make people look somewhere where they don't want them to look. So what exactly is going on inside of the police forces of this country? Because that surely is the question we must be asking. Because if you said to me that somebody had stolen something, but they hadn't actually stolen the thing that you think they've stolen something else. And when you asked why have they stolen that, they said, oh, well, I don't know, nothing to do with me. The police seem to have no clue as to how to do any policing anymore. That seems to be the problem. Front page of the Daily Mail, Widdicombe suspect probed over left-wing extremism. Detectives are examining if left-wing extremism fueled the brutal attack on Anne Widdicombe, who was bludgeoned to death in her remote Devon home last week. A key line of inquiry for detectives is whether the 28-year-old suspected killer had looked at other political figures from the likes of Reform UK and other parties before the shocking murder last Wednesday. And how about this? Nigel Farage has had 597 death threats in the past 4 months. And one of the things that we know, which has been happening in our political sphere, is that other politicians from other parties, like Labour particularly, and probably other parties to the left of Labour, have been more or less mocking Nigel Farage, more or less mocking Reform, and saying they're suffering from sort of faux anger, fake anger, they're saying, over this whole situation. And I can tell you for a fact that Nigel Farage and Richard Tice and other people in Reform have been incandescent about this, because they've been trying to draw the attention of the authorities to Nigel Farage's problem with security and Nigel Farage's problem with so many death threats. And nobody's been taking it seriously. The party says it has recorded 1,577 threats against Mr Farage since February, including 597 death threats, which is approximately 10 death threats a day. The figures include multiple threats from a number of individuals who the party believes are fixated with the idea of killing him. Mr Farage will present the figures when he holds talks with the head of the Home Office's elite security team in a bid to improve protection for Reform MPs following the murder of Anne Widdicombe. The scale of the threats to him emerged as part of an escalating row about the level of protection offered to Mr Farage by the authorities. Reform Treasury spokesman Robert Jenrick accused ministers of playing politics with the safety of politicians. Now, everybody can see what's going on here. And as you can probably expect, much of the attacks on Nigel Farage have stopped for the moment. The attacks on him, and by attacks I mean the attacks in the papers, the attacks on his finances, the attacks on his associations, the attacks on what he does, the attacks on how he operates. Narky says, how long before the attendance switches back to Farage and the 5 million? Well, it's a good question. Bottom line is here, right, that it's incredibly insensitive of every newspaper organisation and, of course, every politician in Parliament to mock Farage, to mock Reform, and to criticise them as if they're somehow the devil incarnate. Richard Tice said to us yesterday, he knows very well that the reason that people are picking on Reform is because they don't like their politics. Gawain Towler's going to join us a little bit later on. He's, of course, with Reform. We've got a clip, I think, of him talking about the police investigation. Yeah. Should we have a look at that? Let's have a look at that.
It's a shame. It's just a shame that in the past they'd have said all avenues of investigation are open, but this time they tried to close out avenues of investigation, and it appears they've reopened them. And in a time when trust in the police is at an all-time low, this just plays into that. They're trying to massage public opinion rather than do the job of investigating a brutal murder. And we saw it over Henry Novak, we saw it in the Southport. And this is, if they'd just stuck to the normal, what we were always used to, people would have been happy that they're getting on with the job. But by appearing to rule something out and then a few days later bringing it back in, they look manipulative. And that's a shame.
I believe what they said on Friday was there was no reason to believe at that point that there was any political motive. Well, and they've had new evidence now.
Yes, there was no reason to believe, but what they should have said is all avenues of investigations are open. Not rule anything in, not rule anything out. That is what they always used to do. So why did they try and close some line of thinking out? Because they wanted to massage public opinion. And I'm sorry, but that when they have there's so little faith in their activities these days, they've now look, even if they haven't been, they now look as if they're trying to manipulate the public's view. And that's an appalling place for the police to be. And it's such a, my grandfather was a copper. I believed wholeheartedly that the police were a good thing as I grew up. You know, until I was 15, one of my ambitions was to help the police with their inquiries until I discovered what it meant. And now I don't trust them an inch. But that's a shame, isn't it?
Isn't it fair, though, that as new information comes to light, as
Of
new
course.
evidence comes to light,
Of
the
course.
police investigation
But why
develops?
were they publicly ruling things out, telling people that we have no evidence of that? It basically said they could just say all open avenues of inquiry are open. That's all they needed to say. So why did they specifically rule things out publicly, or at least appear to?
That's good. Why did they specifically rule things out, or at least appear to, is what Gawain Taylor has to say. And he's right, isn't he? Because that's exactly what they did. They appeared to rule out the fact that this could be an act of terror. They appeared to rule out the fact that this could be some way political. They said at this stage, they used that as a kind of cover-all, but they basically said it. It doesn't matter if you say at this stage, because you might as well say that at any stage. At this stage, I think I might be going for a cup of tea. At this stage, well, you're going for a cup of tea. At this stage, I can't tell you if I'm going to go for a holiday at this stage. Doesn't mean you're not going to go on holiday, does it? At this stage, we don't think that there's a political motive. That's what they said. At this stage, there is no evidence to suggest that there is a political motive. Well, that's because they didn't have any evidence. They hadn't been to the house. They hadn't examined the phone. They hadn't checked out what was actually likely to be the case. So why did they say it? There can only be one reason. They wanted to distract the people who were watching them. They wanted to distract the journalists. They wanted to distract the news agenda. Perhaps they even wanted to distract the people in reform. But look at the actual consequences of what's happened here. The people who are in the Reform Party have been in some danger for some time, and they've known it, and they've talked about it, and they've asked for protection, and they've been denied it. Now, finally, Shabana Mahmood, after somebody's been murdered, Anne Widdicombe, a 78-year-old woman who lived alone, who was murdered brutally last week, just ridiculous, isn't it? We'll hear from Prue Leith in a little while. Her son, of course, is Danny Kruger, who is a member of Reform, as an MP for Reform. She's very worried about him. And why wouldn't you be? If you had a son or a daughter in a political party that was being victimised, not only by the press, and not only by Parliament, but also by vicious, nasty, horrible lefties out there who wish to do them harm. Stephen Barrett's here? Yeah. Stephen Barrett, very good morning to you, sir.
Well, good morning, Mike, but
it's not.
I mean it's not good, is it? I mean, are we to carry on pretending that the world is good and great when we have to live through this? It's not good.
No.
And the idea. I mean, I'm still not over what. And actually, we have to say what allegedly happened to Anne, because we have to be very careful, because we can't prejudice any potential future trial. So we do have to still be careful. We still have to play by the rules. We still have to be good people. That's what we still have to do. And yet,
but I think we can say that she's been murdered. We just can't say who did it, right?
Yes, probably. What we can't do is presume guilt.
Yes,
which is what, by the way, our political opponents always accuse us of. They always assume that we are immediately guilty of all sorts of things that, by the way, we don't actually do. But we live in this world, and it's a very grim world. It's not one that I think my granny would have known or expected. It's not one I think that my biological parents would have known or expected. This is uncharted territory, I think, for most of us who are in Britain. This is not something we've had to experience before. I think it's going to be very interesting if you've got Prue Leith coming on. I'm going to be very interested in listening to her, because what are we doing? Where have we got to? Why? And when people talk about Nigel Farage, that you and I will talk about Nigel Farage like a normal human being, but there are some people who talk about him as though he's not a normal human being. Some
Yeah.
people who talk about him as though he's some sort of evil person, which
Yeah.
he obviously isn't.
Yes.
But why has this become part of our discourse? Why has it become acceptable? I think for me, what the first shocking incidents were the days after the Brexit referendum, when I'm a respectable barrister and I went into respectable land, i.e., Lincoln's Inn, and people were saying really quite outrageous things about Leave voters. Just I don't know why you'd say that about anybody who had any political opinion at all. Why would you be out? Why would you say outrageous things about them? But it happened. And I would go to party after party after party in the city of London or in Westminster, and people would say outrageous things about Leave voters. Just really just offensively, unnecessarily rude things about them. And I suppose it's 10 years later now, isn't it? But we've not improved. And Anne Widdecombe had to die in a grotesque and just horrendous way. And I think it should hit us. I embrace the idea that we just talk about our feelings and just
Absolutely.
just admit that what happened to her is so horrendous that, I mean, it's just awful. It's just awful.
Well, I've been saying this since Friday, which was a shocking day for me, because at that point I didn't even know what had happened. But the fact that she had died was terrible enough, because she was a regular guest on this show, as you are. Every Monday she would come on at 8:40 with her inglorious mixture of funny remarks, observations, wisdom, knowledge, great grasp of policy and particular subject matters, but just a really entertaining individual. And I was really very upset about all of it. And then in the afternoon, when it emerged that actually it was much worse than we thought, and that somebody had actually killed her, I mean, I still can't stop thinking about it, all the time. And particularly, what her last moments must have been, just terrible thoughts, really awful thoughts. And I'm like with you, I prefer to talk about it. Doesn't make me feel any better, but I'm not going to talk about it. And I'm not going to not talk about it because the police don't want me to, And at least finally we would appear with Lawrence Taylor and the anti-terrorism squad to have a decent police team on it now, I think. At least I hope so. Certainly better than the one that was in Devon and Cornwall, who told us specifically lies, or at least untruths at the very least.
No, the police handling of this has been as appalling as police handling of recent events has always been. Devon and Cornwall police clearly could not deal with this, and it's right that it's taken off their hands. I think we probably do need to largely correct the police in this country. That's something we're going to need to look into in the coming year, because it's not a system that works. And we know that the police are largely infected by this through largely the College of Policing, largely infected with wokeism and largely sort of corrupted by Marxist ideology. And it's not good for them and it's not good for us. And that needs fixing. But the sheer horror of what Anne went through, actually, it was something you tweeted that really touched me and made me think as a dad. You used the word, "I wish I could have protected her."
Yeah,
and that is, I wish I could have. Maybe if God had arranged things differently, and I could have been in her house in Devon, at a particular time to protect her from this, from whatever allegedly. But we are going to have to go back to allegedly, because we just don't know what's going to happen. And the idea that anybody, a man, a woman, a particularly sophisticated llama might get off a criminal charge or might get off a criminal trial because of anything we say, well, that's clearly not on, is it?
No.
We clearly
No.
don't want that.
Of course
So
not.
we are going to have to modify our language, and I might have to be Mr. Boring on Twitter today and go around and just remind everybody that it is only allegedly, because we do have the presumption of innocence. We have the presumption of innocence not really for them, not really for the bad people. We really have it for us, because it makes us better people, which we have to remind ourselves we are the good people. And Anne Widdecombe herself would have always believed in the presumption of innocence. You know she would.
Yes, of course. And
she
also
would
look
uphold
at
it.
what happened in the first instance, whereby if you had decided to go running amok with accusations, the first guy they arrested had nothing to do with it, it would appear.
Well, exactly. So they goodness knows what they were doing arresting the first guy, but that is precisely why, because if you don't have the presumption of innocence, you're basically assuming that Devon and Cornwall police are competent, which we know to be untrue.
Yes.
So we have to cling to these things. But I find them as I get older, I find them increasingly comforting that these are the values. When they talk about what is it to be British, it's like, well, the presumption of innocence is definitely at the absolute core. Property rights probably comes second.
Yes.
They bang on about human
Although
rights.
McP has just made a rather astute observation on the YouTube chat to say, except if you're in Southport and Keir Starmer was involved, because of course he famously said that everybody who was involved in far-right thuggery would not only be proven guilty, but would be convicted and would be punished, even though we didn't know who they were and what they'd done and whether they were innocent.
Yes, that was when the mask really slipped on the human rights barristers. But it wasn't just Starmer. The Home Office also did it, and that was under Yvette Cooper. And you start to see why. Well, why do we cling to the presumption of innocence? Well, we do it because our enemies don't.
Yeah.
We do it because the bad people don't. And Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper assumed everybody involved in anything to do with Southport was guilty automatically. And that shows how bad they are. I don't respect either of them as human beings at all. I have zero respect for them. And we just have to be better than our opponents. We have to be better than these people. And we do that by clinging to the presumption of innocence. It is absolutely fundamentally important. It's vital to a free and healthy society. And so we will cling to it, even through these most trying and difficult of times. But the one I like to constantly go to, Mike, is that you find everybody who is sentenced to a lesser sentence than a mum on Twitter.
Yeah.
Lucy Connolly, bless her, and I've bought her book, and I encourage others to. But Lucy Connolly, you find everybody who's sentenced to less than she was. Every rapist sentenced to less than she was. Every violent offender sentenced to less than she was.
Every paedophile.
Yeah, exactly. We can say it in unison because of all the paedophiles who receive pathetic sentences, absolutely pathetic sentences. But that is our country now. And the last thing we have to hold on to is the presumption of innocence, which we shall do. We shall grant that gift to whoever, if anybody is charged over the death of Anne. But we will also grieve. We are entitled to grieve. And one of the things about the way that this is playing in the media, I'm sure you've seen, I know you will have seen one hysterical journalist in particular, and his reaction to all of this, which is just grotesque. It's just trying to insert your own narcissism into this event. We who miss Anne, we will grieve, and we will be allowed to grieve, whether they like it or not.
Yes. And we will also be entitled, I think, to investigate, and without individualizing it, if you like, this now apparent plan, possible plan, which exists out there in the wide world, of threats to MPs, particularly to Reform MPs. I mean, an extraordinary number in the Mail today where they've said that 1,577 threats have been made against Nigel Farage since February, right? 1,577 threats. Now, 597 of those were death threats, which is approximately, by my reckoning, 10 death threats a day. Now, according to Reform, which is why I know personally that Richard Tice and Nigel Farage have been very upset by everything surrounding this story, is because they have told the authorities and have repeatedly told the authorities that many of these threats are coming from fixated individuals who are continuing to make them. Now, in any normal world, those individuals would be at the very least spoken to, arrested, something would happen to them. Judging from this story that I'm reading, nothing's happened to them.
I mean, that is just absurd. And I can't really imagine what it must be like. I suppose I'm lucky in a way in that I get to be vaguely public, but I don't seem to attract this level of threat and attention. It must be absolutely horrendous. And you've just got to have massive levels of sympathy with these people, because that is a trauma that they're being exposed to. If Nigel Farage gets 10 death threats a day, I mean, I'm not sure I'd leave the house.
Well, this would also explain. You remember the ridiculous kind of victimization of Nigel Farage when he got very angry at the airport because Sky had gone to his daughter's house. Now we know why. Because he's getting 10 death threats a bloody day. I'd be pretty angry.
Well, but also, I mean, there's an ability in that. So he doesn't complain about his 10 death threats a day. But he what made him snap was the risk to his daughter.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I get that. That's like great. So he's being a man about himself. He's being, a hero. He's toughing up. He's 10 death threats a day. No bother, because this man is just incredibly strong. But what makes him snap is the risk to his daughter. It's like, I get that. I don't understand people who don't understand that. Like, that seems pretty basic to me. That's obviously good.
Yes, of course it is. But he gets vilified for it, as he gets vilified for so many things by those people that you describe, who should be in any other place civilized individuals. And because we're not talking here about criminal class individuals, we're talking about middle class barristers, lawyers, civil servants, managerial people that work in banks who decided to, debank him, people who work at the National Crime Agency, very possibly. There's an awful lot of people working against reform. And I'm absolutely certain there's been a concerted media campaign against them in the past few months, which seems to have slowed down slightly for obvious reasons, because even they can see that it's not a good look to go after a party which is grieving because one of its spokespeople has been brutally murdered,
It's just, I mean, even if the campaign has stopped, it's not fundamentally going to stop, because what we're seeing is what we're in, Mike, is a situation where vested interests are going to act against the idea of reform, not as a party, but as a concept. Reforming the United Kingdom is not in the interests of anybody who is currently benefiting from the arrangements. The simple fact is, we can't go on like this because those vested interests are bleeding us dry. We're actually an incredibly rich country. You don't know it, and it doesn't feel it, because all of that money is being bled out of us by these vested interests. It's like when they go on about the climate change thing. Climate change is probably happening. Who knows? But the terrifying people about weather is used entirely to gain access to public money and public subsidies.
Did you see that ridiculous story the other day in The Guardian? And it came out of the Met office, I believe, that 440 people a day died during May and June heat waves, right, because of the heat. And I'm sorry, is this some kind of comedy show, right? Because
it's made up rubbish.
It's just made up. Yeah, it's made up. And the one sort of qualifying line was that many of those who died would not have died had the Earth's temperature not risen by 1.5 degrees Celsius in the past 25 years or something. And it was just bollocks. I'm sorry for using such a word early in the morning, but it was bollocks.
No, and I think we do have to use demotic Anglo-Saxon. I think that the Lord God gave us these words for these times. You know, in decent times we use decent words,
Yes.
and in indecent times we may very well have to change our use of language. I saw the brilliant Catherine McBride, who's a trade expert,
Yes.
use a phrase that solar farms aren't solar farms; they're subsidy farms.
Yeah.
What they are farming is the public subsidy,
Yes.
and that really
True.
brought it home to me. That this idea that all they're doing is trying to get access to public money. It's got nothing to do with airy fairy ideas and happy clappy whatever. Just as in the old days, just as 2,000 years ago, I could have told you that the volcano was exploding because you're bad people, and if you give me all your money, I'll pray to the volcano and it won't explode again.
Yeah.
That's all that's going on.
Right.
That's what climate change is. Of course, we might be experiencing. I think we probably are warming a little bit, but the idea that anybody can control it. The idea that another human being can somehow be in charge of it if only you give them all of your money.
Yes.
That's just ridiculous.
Well, I like to use reverse logic on them as well, which is to basically say, look, in my lifetime, for at least the best part of the last 30 odd years, we have been putting in measures to make sure that the Earth does not heat up. And apparently it hasn't worked. So maybe we should just stop. Right? Yeah.
Well, but that is where you get to eventually with climate change, to say, well, and particularly we are actually an exceptionally good example of this, because Britain has reduced our carbon dioxide emissions by ridiculous levels. Well, we've done that,
right, and
it hasn't worked. So there we are. Then best start digging out the coal and burning it. There's nothing wrong with being a healthy and rich society, but that these people think that there is something morally wrong about this. It's all to do with their warped version of morality. This is in many ways a replacement religion, but the simple fact is we need energy in order to make stuff.
Right.
We need coal and oil in order to make plastics, and we need plastics because before we had plastics, everything was rubbish. So we do actually need to go back to single use. But by the way, we never left single use plastics.
No,
I mean the idea that we only now have multi use it's just nonsense. And we should probably go back to having straws that are made of a substance that doesn't melt into the drink. But this is all really, from their point of view, this is nihilistic communism. This is really about creating a society which is an unhappy and unhealthy society, purely so that they can feel special. The one that got me was the report this week that they're going to try and stop us eating beef and lamb.
Yes.
And they're going to try and do that. And the only reason to they're going to use CO2 and the climate myth and invoke, much in the same way that you and I could go and visit a psychic on Brighton Pier right now. They use these models that tell them exactly what they want to hear. But the only reason to restrict ordinary people's access to beef and lamb is because you want to eat beef and lamb and for them to eat lentils.
Right.
And that you want to do that because you're a narcissistic socialist and you want to feel superior to other people. And one of for all the complaints that are thrown at you and at me, I don't want to, and I know you don't want to, feel superior to a fellow human. There's no need for it.
No, of course. It's the same with when they say, oh, we must put the prices up of flying because, too many people are flying. So who are you punishing there? You're punishing people who want to go on a decent, cheap holiday with their family, having worked most of the year and haven't got 26,000 a week to spend in the Seychelles. Yeah. So that's who you're punishing.
Yeah, that's always who they punish, and they don't want people to improve their lives or to have more fun and more joy, and that's why I stand in absolute opposition to these people. I want everybody, certainly everybody in Britain, to eat beef, to eat lamb, to go on holiday, to have a fantastic time. I'd like us all to get air conditioning.
Yes. And of course, if you don't want to eat beef and lamb, we're not going to make you either. If you don't want to, that's your choice, you know.
Exactly. And people should be able to live exactly how they wish, and with a minimum level of interference. They should not be required to get online accounts, or to sign up to things, or to have club cards. I really should complain more about the behaviours of supermarkets. They really are outrageous. But ultimately, I just want people to be free, and for that, I'm called a right-wing bigot. You know, for that, you know, and Anne Widdecombe didn't ever want to tell me how to live my life either. She, you know, all she wanted was for our country to be better, and she's just died in the most horrific way. This is what on earth Britain has got itself into. What on earth? How on earth we got here? 10 death threats a day for Nigel Farage.
I know.
What are we doing?
It's
what
horrific.
Are we doing?
It's literally...
Who are we as a people?
Yeah, I know. And where are we going as well, more importantly? I don't know. Anyway, listen, great to see you, Stephen. Thank you, as ever. Perspicacious as ever, and brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Have a great day. Happy Wednesday. I know it's hard, but we shall do what we can. 7:37, we've got Lee Harris coming up in a minute. First, we should probably do some news, shall we? With Edward Hughes.
Edward the News Hughes here with your Wednesday bulletin. Counter-terrorism police are leading the investigation into the targeted killing of former MP Anne Widdecombe. A 28-year-old suspect remains in custody as officers probe possible links to other attacks, heightening security concerns for politicians, including Nigel Farage, who reports frequent threats. In politics, Andy Burnham is gaining momentum amid Labour tensions, with reports of cabinet manoeuvring as Keir Starmer's position faces scrutiny. MPs have approved the Hillsborough Law, hailed as a major step for justice. On the sports front, Jude Bellingham's double helped England advance in the World Cup. Elsewhere, plans for a midnight social media curfew for 16 and 17-year-olds are under discussion, while pension reforms could see millions working longer. Please remember to like and subscribe. Latest Tigers.
He's a bit behind the eight ball, isn't he, old Edward Hughes, with the sport there. He says Jude Bellingham's double put England through to the next round. I mean, they're playing the next round tonight. Edward, get with the programme, matey. Right? Because it turns out that England are playing Argentina tonight for a place in the final. And, of course, there's one of the headlines on the front pages this morning on the Metro front page. Don't jinx it, Keir. Because you know what Starmer's like. Every time he goes anywhere near a bleeding football match, whoever he's supporting tends to lose. Because he's talking about going over to the final if England make it to the final. If England beat Argentina tonight, 8 o'clock kickoff, by the way, he's thinking of going. And worse than that, he's thinking of taking Andy Burnham with him. You imagine the two of them sitting together in a football stadium. The boy from North and the human rights lawyer, who was given, by the way, yesterday, the Legion d'Honneur by Emmanuel Macron. Should we have a bit of that? What do you think? There they are having a bit of a hug. What about the old...
clip to follow.
The clip to follow?
Yeah.
When you say to follow, you mean... You haven't got it? Right, okay then. Let's talk to Lee Harris, who is here. Lee, very good morning to you. Oh, he's not here either.
Here he is.
There he is. Hello, Lee. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I can't hear you, Lee.
You've been muted. I think you're muted.
Oh, my bad. Sorry.
There you go. No, you're not muted. Well
it's
done.
because I had my fan going, so I wanted to switch it. I just want to say about the World Cup.
Yes.
Right? So I don't want to jinx it, but let's say we make the final.
Yeah.
But just imagine we win the World Cup.
Yeah.
And apparently I've been told that singing Keir Starmer is a wanker is banned, right? So imagine, because what they're going to do, right? It's the last game,
Yeah.
right? So we win the World Cup and Keir Starmer is a wanker, rings around the stadium as loud as possible, and the cameras just go on to Keir Starmer at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, that would just tick every single happy box I've got. I mean,
should we practice his facial expression? As that's how he looks when things are going on around him that he doesn't quite understand, which is most of the time, and he kind of has this fixed grin. We've actually got a poll going, which is basically loosely based on Keir Starmer. Have we got the poll? Yeah. The poll is what's the best thing about being a former Prime Minister, right?
Yeah.
starting a foundation, after dinner speaking tour, lunches with Lord Ali, and what's the final one? Trips to Ukraine.
I did
Starting
that
a
poll,
foundation's in black. Does that matter?
That's one I selected.
45% of people seem to think it's the third one, which you've now removed again. Sorry,
That's what I voted for. I
What was that
voted
one?
in the poll.
What?
Dinner with Lord Ali.
Dinner with Lord Ali, yeah, very good, very nice too. Yeah, so Keir Starmer, this is his final farewell, isn't it? I mean, I don't know. I think there must be another. Every week I keep thinking it's the last Prime Minister's questions, but every week there's another one. So I think this might be the last one, which would be his last Prime Minister's questions. So maybe it's time for an appreciation or otherwise of the world's worst Prime Minister.
Yeah, of the world's worst Prime Minister, absolutely. It's been a bit of a weird process, isn't it, with this sort of semi-bizarre coronation that we're seeing. And by the way, you know, Andy Burnham hiding away completely. And I heard yesterday that they sneakily readjusted the timetable in Parliament so he could avoid even a tiny bit of scrutiny that the Tories would have been able to give him. So they've just literally just kept him away from all scrutiny altogether.
Right. Well, I mean, there's a campaign at the moment going to say, can they extend Parliament time next week? Because next week it's supposedly the last week before summer recess, and there's no plan for him to even face questions from anybody.
It's ridiculous. I don't want to change the subject too much, Mike, but I really hate the fact that Parliament shuts for recess for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so public sector. I mean, it's like they're all still at school.
I know.
They've never had a proper job. So it's just an extension of their school. They're still all at school or something. I mean, I've been running my own business for 15 years. I mean, I can't remember actually. I mean, there's a 5-year period where I never even took a holiday.
Right.
Like not even one. I just worked the whole way through it. That's what normal people do. A lot of people can't even afford the summer holidays.
Right. This is the thing. And if you go to Westminster and you go to the Houses of Parliament, there is a kind of a school-like feeling to it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I just think it's ridiculous. I mean, it's something as important as running the country. You shouldn't be taking a 6-week holiday. Now, I can hear the MPs shouting in my ear saying, we actually do still work during those 6 weeks. You know, we go back to our constituencies. Well, yeah, great. But you were doing that anyway.
Yeah.
I just believe that running the country is slightly more important as a whole. We shouldn't be shutting it down completely.
This is the other thing, that this dead duck government has been doing nothing literally for months now, because ever since I would say probably the May elections, the local elections, where Starmer's, you know, been clearly on his way out, there's really been nothing done in you know, he's made the odd trip to Ukraine, the odd trip to Paris, you know, he's gone to Ankara, which was my favourite one of all, because we could happily say Keir Starmer's in Ankara, which has, you know, got a nice ring to it. But so there's a clip, I don't know if we've got this one, Darren Jones, right, who has been, at first he was Rachel Reeves's kind of, you know, right-hand man, then he became Keir Starmer's right-hand man. He's actually being interviewed, right, and being asked, in the last couple of weeks, it must have been very difficult for you running government. And he goes, he said, we haven't really been able to do too much. I've spent most of the time writing a handover note. And I'm going, in business, you write a handover note in one afternoon or something, right? You don't take 2 weeks to do it. Have we got it? Yeah, let's have a look.
Machine disengaging from the politicians, in theory, on top of it.
Yes, and it's slowed down a bit because you can't bind your successors. So I've not been able to make new decisions in the last couple of weeks. I've been able to respond to issues, whether it's national security related or kind of operational issues. But essentially, I've been spending my time making sure that's looked after, but then also writing a handover note and thank you notes and tidying up loose ends so that when my successor comes in, they're ready to get going.
So you're pretty clear you're moving?
I definitely am not going to be the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister from next week, no.
Look at the scrutiny there from Andrew Marr. Ooh, so you're pretty clear you're moving, are you? How about, what the hell are you talking about? Why are you wasting public money by writing thank you notes and handover notes and doing nothing else? Just go.
Yeah.
Maybe,
you know
give up your salary.
I liked it what you said yesterday, Mike. I saw you on another show where you said that the reason independent media is doing so well and dominating is because the good people, the good people from mainstream media have come across to independent media, and you ask the right questions. I don't want to say you're too old school, Mike, but experienced is a much better word. I like to say you've been in this game a long time, and you're able to ask those cutting questions. And what's left in mainstream media, bar a few fantastic people, they just don't challenge the orthodoxy anymore. They don't challenge power anymore. It's so noticeable as well. I mean, the public is seeing this all over, and that's why people are flocking over to channels like this. Outspoken as well. I just think that this. I mean, it's not a think anymore. This is the way people are going to get their news. And it's going to continue, and it's going to get worse. And do you know what? I think that they're absolutely they are absolutely petrified. This is why we're seeing them. Again, don't want to go off topic too much, but this is why we're seeing them, trying to bring out legislation to, move the goalposts again, to amplify the BBC and amplify mainstream.
To bury shows like this on YouTube so people can't find them. But I mean, I don't know if you saw last Sunday Laura Kunsberg's interview with Rachel Reeves, where she had a sort of, it was almost like, through the keyhole. It's a picture of him walking through the garden. Oh, it's lovely, isn't it? The garden's nice. All my kids have had a lovely time here. We've had some parties, You've ruined the country. She's sitting there telling Laura Kunsberg that she's improved the economy. Today, there's a story in the Mail which says 3 firms a day are going bust. A day. Yeah. Right? That's the legacy of Rachel Reeves. Instead of all this nonsense about, it's been very tough being the first woman chancellor. I couldn't give a stuff.
No, she's every single policy that woman has come out with has had an extremely damaging effect on the economy. Without any, I run my own business. I've seen the market. Businesses at the moment are either holding fire, if they've got money, they're not spending it because they're not quite sure what's going to be happening. And there are a lot more businesses that have a lot less money at the moment. My business survives on businesses having spare cash, right? And that's diminished quite a lot since she's come into power. And there are companies that I've worked with that no longer exist because of Rachel Reeves. She's made it incredibly difficult to employ people. Incredibly expensive to employ people. I mean, the country's finances are in we are literally teetering right on the edge of a massive financial crisis. Which potentially could lead to an early election. There are a couple of things now which I think could lead to an early election. I think Andy Burnham potentially is confident and cocky enough to potentially call one. I don't know. He's hard to read because we know nothing about Andy Burnham. Not really, anyway. So it's impossible to really just think what he's going to do. The other part of me thinks they'll never call one because too many other backbenchers know they're going to lose their jobs. So
I think there is that. I think part of the problem is that they know that if things had been, say, the way they were 3 months ago, before the local elections, when they knew that they were in a bad place, but they thought they might be able to recover it. When the local election results came in, it looked very much like Labour could never win another general election at all. But since then, and the attacks on reform, all the attacks on Nigel Farage, Andy Burnham winning Makerfield, I think that they've got a chance of winning in 2029 because they're deluded. They absolutely won't. They won't do it. And the Tories are also deluded. They think that they've sort of made some kind of comeback because Kemi Badenoch's slightly better than the last leader that they had. But, in the end, Reform is still leading in the polls. The people make it a lot of the fact that they're not leading by as much, but they're still leading. Yeah,
it has slowed a little bit. But I would argue that, there's been a lot of relentless... it's been very noticeable. I think, like you say, since Makerfield... It's been extremely obvious. Actually, probably since the local elections, I would say, it's been extremely obvious that they've, I think, collectively and very quietly realised that there is a very, a good chance that they are all going to lose their jobs and Reform may well win the next election. And we've seen, I don't want to bring us down too much, but the stuff that I have seen over the last few weeks from left-wing media, from the left in general, not all the left, but I think it's been absolutely disgusting. The attacks on Nigel Farage for simply mourning for a dear friend of his, Anne Widdecombe absolutely adored Nigel Farage, and seeing the likes of Dan Hodges, who I don't know why I'm saying this. I actually quite respected the guy. I didn't agree with a lot of what he said, but I've seen him on occasion be fair, right? I've seen him on occasion be fair. Dan Hodges, over the last, since what happened to Anne, the awful, what happened to Anne Widdecombe, he has been utterly vile. Him, Kevin Maguire. I mean, what's Nigel Farage going to do, right? He's the party leader, right? So even just on a visual level, he is the party leader. If he did nothing after this, absolutely nothing, which, by the way, was pretty much what every other party leader has done, nothing.
Yeah.
Why didn't Ed Davey phone Nigel Farage and say, "Do you mind if I come down to that memorial?"
Yeah.
Why didn't Kemi Badenoch say, "Wouldn't it have been lovely if we saw some unity from the three parties, just like we did with Joe Cox?" I mean, I was reminded when they showed, I was distraught when Joe Cox.
Yeah, of course.
I'll admit it publicly. I cried my eyes out when Joe Cox was murdered. I was absolutely distraught. I've got nothing in common with that party.
Right.
I despised the Labour Party, but she was a human being, and she seemed quite lovely.
And she shouldn't be killed for being a politician.
Absolutely not.
You shouldn't have to say it, but
No, absolutely not. So why didn't it churns my stomach? Why didn't these party leaders unify with Nigel Farage? They couldn't do it, Mike. They just couldn't do it. They decided that they were going to attack him instead.
Yeah.
Oh, look at Nigel Farage politicising Anne Widdecombe's murder while he's there with a bunch of flowers.
And then, of course, also the things that he was saying, we now know why he was saying them, because, as I said to Stephen Barrett, the numbers here are quite staggering. 1,577 threats against Nigel Farage since February, right? 597 of those are death threats. There's nearly 600 death threats, right, in the space of a few months. No wonder he was angry when they discovered that they'd go and visit his daughter's house from Sky News. No wonder he was angry when Anne Widdecombe was murdered, his friend and colleague, because he's facing that every single day. And they're all mocking him and saying, "Oh, what's this faux outrage? You've got the same protection as everybody else." Well, guess what? He needs more protection than everybody else because of all of these threats made by deranged lefties.
Yeah, and it's the be kind left. Maybe I won't go as far as say they want something bad to happen to him. I just don't think they care, Mike, whether something bad happens to him, and that's me being charitable.
Yeah.
I think it's been utterly vile. The one slightly good thing about this, right? I don't know if it's been with the same as you. I speak to a lot of people that are what I would say are normies. That's not a criticism. People that genuinely aren't as engaged in the news as we are. Yeah. They're seeing it. They are absolutely seeing that. And these politicians, on the left, and I would actually include some of the Conservative Party in this as well. They don't realise there's so much. They're so in their bubble, right? They're so focused on attacking Nigel Farage, they forget what it looks like to the public. They think the public are on their side. That is I haven't spoken to everyone in the UK, but my general feeling is from the people I've spoken to dotted around the country is this is very visible. Yeah. People are seeing how utterly nasty they're being. This is backfiring massively for them. Yeah.
Every single time I put on Times Radio, which is, much against my better judgment, but in the mornings when I'm coming in, there's such a paucity of decent stuff to listen to. And it's only a 15-minute trip, so it's not too bad. But they've got every 5 minutes, the Gabriel Pogren's podcast series on, the criminal behind Nigel Farage. And this whole thing about George Cottrell. And it's just relentless. And even now, when we know that all of these death threats are being made, they're still pushing it and they're still trying to make out that, what about the criminal behind Andy Burnham? Why is nobody writing about Louise Haigh, who's also a criminal, if you want to call her that? How about the podcast series on the criminal behind Andy Burnham? No, they don't want to do that, do they?
Well, they can't jeopardise the golden boy coming in to replace him. That's the thing. I think they are aware on the left that even Andy Burnham might not be able turn around Labour's fortunes. I mean, we know he won't, right? It doesn't matter whether you put the Messiah in, as leader of the Labour Party.
Yeah.
The policies that they've enacted are not going to make this country a better place. It is inevitable, certainly on a financial, certainly with our economy, that's not going to get any better. In fact, under Andy Burnham, I think it's going to get worse a lot faster. I think he's going to borrow even more money.
Well, have you seen the state of Manchester's economy? They're in massive debt, nearly 2 billion quid's worth of debt. And that's just Manchester. What's he going to do to Britain?
Yeah. And God knows who we're going to get as Chancellor. I do hear that I saw in this morning's papers that apparently Ed Miliband is definitely not going to get Chancellor job, according to.
Well, that's I suppose some crumb of comfort at the very least. But listen, I've got a little clip to show you. Hopefully, have we got the Andy Burnham one?
Yes.
Should we play a Starmer alert first? Even though it's not necessarily, it's only Starmer at the end, but it's that face that you'll see in a minute.
And it is happening because of the Prime Minister's commitment to a country based on justice and fairness, and we thank him for that. Yeah! We have all recognised.
Yeah, get rid of that. I mean, he makes that sort of faux, oh, thank you so much. I mean, it's appalling, isn't it? We haven't yet got a Burnham. We're still working on a Burnham alert, but I see that he's now wearing a suit that at least fits him, maybe he's been to Lord Ali's tailor to get himself made over for the coming of the new Prime Minister, the coming of the new Christ, or whatever he's going to call himself.
What I'm not looking forward to, Mike, is, and I guarantee you this is going to happen, is the humanisation of Keir Starmer after he's left office. The kind of, the relaxed Keir Starmer interviews that we might see here or there. I just want him to disappear permanently. In fact, I think he should be exiled for treason, Mike. He should be banished somewhere. Maybe send him over to France or something. I don't even know what that award was that he was given. What the hell is an honour de Legionnaire?
It's the Legion d'Honneur, it says here.
Sounds like he's got a cold or something.
Yeah, I know. It's Macron's. Macron has handed Keir Starmer France's highest honour in recognition of his decency and commitment to European security. It's a shame he hasn't got any commitment to British security. You know what I mean? Keir has been the first serving Prime Minister to receive the Legion d'Honneur, an honour created by Napoleon, which is actually pretty apt, isn't it? Because Napoleon was the enemy of Britain, and now he's given an award to Keir Starmer for being an enemy of Britain. Brilliant.
That is brilliant. And just on a on an optics level, us in Britain have a few security issues, right?
One or two, certainly with illegals coming over the channel in massive numbers. Yeah, from
funnily
France.
enough, provided by Macron on a plate. Right. And here he is getting some sort of security honour. I mean, they're so out of touch. Yeah. The optics are awful. And I think it's actually quite fitting seeing Keir Starmer get this kind of award, because everyone thinks it's utterly ludicrous. It's almost like a comedy exit for Keir Starmer.
Right. Yeah, and here's what you could have won. But we haven't got that for you. But you've got this little statue, the Legion d'Honneur from Napoleon. He's only about the same size as well, funnily enough. But unbelievable, isn't it? Absolutely horrific. Lee, listen, great to see you as ever, and thank you for providing as much common sense as we can handle in the first hour of the show. It's coming up to 8 o'clock. Lee Harris, thanks very much indeed. Got some great messages coming in on Substack, actually, which I'll get to in a moment. Substack working today, which is always nice. And I have to say, and I know many of you get very upset when Substack doesn't work. It's unfortunately, it's a quirk of the system, right? Apparently, occasionally, and Pooch was explaining this to me this morning, when we go live on YouTube, right, you hit the same button and it just goes live. With Substack, you have to change the code every day, and sometimes it doesn't actually work, and it's completely outside of our control. I'm speaking to a couple of other people who also have Substack shows that go out, and they have the same problem, the same issue. So my apologies. It's an incomplete system. It's not anybody's fault. It's just one of those things. Some super chats, though, from Charlotte. Morning, Mike. The uni parties and the establishment are terrified their seats on the gravy train are going to be taken. Let's have an election now, says Loyal. I'd like that. I'd like an election now. Panda says the MSM, mainstream media, and others in parliamentary opponents are guilty of stirring up hatred, which has led to inciting bad actors being emboldened to carry out such attacks on Reform's personnel. This has to stop. I agree. Totally agree. One from Sue, who Keir's a wanker and he's a knob. Knob of the North. I'm from the North. I like pies. Confirms the relationship between Macron and Starmer, says Hey Judy. Judes. Yeah, imagine being given an award to celebrate the fact that you've stood up for European security. And it's an award that was originally granted from Napoleon, who was an enemy of Britain. As a legacy for Anne, how about a weekly nomination for Widdy's Weekly Wonder? Your choice on who it should be each week. Nice way to highlight a piece of good news going into the weekend. And remember, that's quite nice, isn't it? Should we try and do that? Let's see if we can come up with a little jingle or a little sting or something for Widdy's Weekly winner. That would be nice. Or Wonder, even. Laura says, Anne was a great inspiration. I love her speech where she says, no one has the right to go through life without being offended or hearing things you don't like. She was right. R.I.P. Anne. True. Bring back the death penalty for murder and for paedophiles, says Baroness Note. A lot of people would agree with that. Graham says the left language about other party members that they disagree with is encouraging sick people to act on their language. The same is happening in America with Trump. Yeah, it's very disturbing, that, isn't it? Mick Rose, a lot of super chats today. Good morning, Mike, Pooch and Charlotte. Please ask Bishop Dewar to canonise Anne Widdecombe and she could be the MG show's patron saint. Love to absolutely everyone. Interesting. Laura Jane, Justice for Anne. Thank you, Laura Jane. Justice for Anne, indeed. Absolutely right. Well, I think at least now we can say that somebody decent is in charge of the police operation. Gillian says this, Anne Widdecombe's property should be dedicated to a beautiful garden of remembrance with the statue of her and her cat, also a museum with her life's work. Yeah, a museum, you know, we didn't put that in. We had a sort of memorial library as a possible choice for something to remember Anne by. I think a lot of people thought a statue would be nice, didn't they? Pano says, Dan Hodges is on Talk Radio at 8 a.m. It'll be interesting to see how he explains himself out of being a callous twat.
Don't advertise it, actually.
Yeah, well, I don't particularly want to watch him saying anything, really. You know, we had an opportunity to get him on the show, and at one point he said he would come on, and then he said he wouldn't, and then he went a bit weird. So, to be honest, we could do without him. We don't need Dan Hodges. Morning, Mike, and all. Saw you on the Dan Wootton show. I had tears with you. God bless you, Anne. Thank you very much. Yeah, I was on with Dan Wootton last night. We did a panel show together actually on Thursday. Tomorrow, isn't it? At CPAC. And in fact, we'll be talking to Kane Blackwell coming in a little while. Mike, saw you on Dan Wootton last night with your wonderful tribute to our lovely Anne, bawling my eyes out again as she was taken from us too soon. I know. It's still so difficult to talk about. You know, so many people had so much love for her and loved her so much without even knowing her. You didn't have to know her. You could just tell that she was brilliant. Anne's mum lived to 95, so she might have been robbed of 17 or more years. True. Very much so. Well, she was in fine fettle. There was no suggestion at any step of the way that she was not capable of living a very, very long and beautifully busy life.
Oh, just last one.
To be honest. Last one. What's happening to Anne's cat?
It's been confirmed it's being looked after.
Yeah, I think I saw a note on that yesterday that the cat, and I think there might have even been more than one. There was Aloysius and there was maybe another one. And in fact, somebody on Substack has found a really nice picture of Anne with her beloved cat Aloysius. I thought I'd share it on Substack. That's from Karen. Thank you for that. Hannah says, fabulous photo. Adrian says, he's a big fella. He was a big fella. He was. CMS says on Substack, the Devon Police Force was in special measures until recently, I heard. Yeah, until last year, actually. Might explain how badly they handled it. And Carol says, I cannot believe the Police Commissioner for Devon spoke yesterday to defend the police. Am I right in thinking that the role of the Police Commissioner is to hold them to account and speak out for the victims? Another major flaw in this investigation and a very bad move by her, as yet again it looks like a PR stunt to cover up the police's poor performance in total. Yeah, they were absolutely and utterly useless. Now, coming up, we've got much, much more to do, many more guests to talk to. I think Chris Rose is our next guest. But first, let's get some news with Edward Hughes.
Hello, everyone. Edward the News Hughes here with your Wednesday bulletin. Counter-terrorism police are leading the investigation into the targeted killing of former MP Anne Widdecombe. A 28-year-old suspect remains in custody, as officers probe possible links to other attacks, heightening security concerns for politicians, including Nigel Farage, who reports frequent threats. In politics, Andy Burnham is gaining momentum amid Labour tensions, with reports of cabinet manoeuvring as Keir Starmer's position faces scrutiny. MPs have approved the Hillsborough Law, hailed as a major step for justice. On the sports front, Jude Bellingham's double helped England advance in the World Cup. Elsewhere, plans for a midnight social media curfew for 16 and 17-year-olds are under discussion, while pension reforms could see millions working longer. Please remember to like and subscribe. Laters Tigers.
Welcome back to the Mike Graham Show. It's 6 minutes past 8. We've got Gawain Towler coming up. We've got Howard Cox coming up. Connor Tomlinson at the end of the show. Laura Perrins, of course, as well. Keep your thoughts coming on the YouTube chat as well. There's lots going on. Many different stories to talk about. And, of course, the big England game tonight, which I know many of you don't care about, but some people do, because it could mean that they get into the final. And lots of the front pages have got Harry Kane on them. Kane and Abel, it says on the front of the Times, training in Kansas before today's clash with Argentina. And as I said, the Metro newspaper saying, you know, don't let Keir jinx it by going to the final if Britain actually get into the final. So also, it's in your hands now, lads, front page of the Sun, is what it says. But before we talk to Chris Rose, and before we go any further, let us have a bit of this. So, here we are. The motorist, once again, in the firing line. Because guess what the Department for Transport wants to do now? The Department for Transport, of course, is run, like most civil service departments, badly. What they see when they see a car and they see somebody driving it is a whole barrel load of cash. That's what they think they want, right? They think that you, as a driver, are there to provide money for cyclists, to provide money for everybody who doesn't drive, to provide money to fix the roads, to provide money to fix the streetlights, to provide money to give to government departments so that they can hire more people to punish you even more for having a car. Because, of course, having a car is the ultimate terrible thing, according to anyone who will tell you that the government departments hate driving cars. They're all cyclists, right? If you go into London nowadays, there are thousands and thousands of cyclists who are all, you know, jockeying for position because that's what they know how to do. All cars are the enemy. But, of course, now what they want to do is charge you per mile to drive a car, not only in this country, but they want to charge EV car drivers to actually drive abroad. How on earth that's going to work, I don't know. But the latest piece of madness from them is that they want to reduce the speed of roads, not just in towns and not just in cities, but all over Britain now. Because, of course, if you live anywhere near most cities now, you'll find that there's 20-mile-an-hour zones all over the place. And usually what happens is that more and more people get fined, more and more people end up having to pay through the nose, sometimes £80, sometimes £120, sometimes £160 for a fine because you did 22 over a 20, 2 miles per hour over it, and you get a fine. I know people in London who have literally given up driving because it's become so difficult not to be fined. And after a while, you just go, I can't afford it. I can't be bothered. I'm just not going to do it. But how about this, right? Councils in rural areas should consider narrowing roads, using more bollards and removing the centre line separating 2 lanes of traffic, because those would be measures to lower people's speeds. Because on most country roads around the world, around Britain, you've basically got no speed limit, which means it's 60. Now, you might say that some roads, because they're quite narrow, are probably not used to people driving at 60 miles an hour. People should be able to drive maybe at 40, but not 20. You cannot reduce country roads to 20 miles an hour. That will literally paralyse Britain. You won't be able to get anything done. You won't be able to go anywhere with any kind of surety. You won't be able to get anything delivered because delivery drivers will be driving at 20 miles an hour. I mean, do they want to take us back to the Stone Age? That's what it seems like. They want you not to drive your car. They want you to give it up. I say to people, yeah, I used to have a bike when I was a child. Now I've got a car because I'm a grown-up. And sometimes you have to put things in it, like a bag, or like, I don't know, some newspapers. or possibly a dog, or possibly some children. And of course, the people who work and live in these kind of, hallowed houses of civil servicedom, like the Department for Transport, they don't think you need any of that because they all live in London. And they go, well, you don't need that, you just get on the tube. Well, I use the tube and I use buses, but I also have a car. Because if I had to try and rely on trains to get from here to wherever it is I'm going at the weekend, there's a pretty good chance that I'd be getting a replacement bus service, because Britain is literally now an island of replacement buses. Jamie says this: the promotion of EVs by the government, oops, we've just lost that, can I get back? The promotion of EVs by the government was just their ploy to create the next cash cow, and many fell for it. Well, I said at the time, when they said, oh, get yourself an electric vehicle because you won't have to pay any road tax. I said, what do you think they're going to do when everybody gets an electric vehicle, when they don't have the money, the £40 million a year that they collect? Or is it 40 billion? I can't remember. I think it's £40 million a year that they collect in road tax. They're going to have to start charging people with EVs road tax. Twiggy says, I had to give up driving. It got so very expensive, so I was stuck with public transport, which is very unreliable on a constant basis. That's the problem. But I kid you not, councils are not legally compelled to follow this guidance which they're being given by the Department for Transport. But you know what's going to happen. They're all going to start going, oh, this is great, cash cow. I know what we can do. We can put some speed cameras in. We can reduce the speed limit on all these roads to 20 miles an hour. And when we collect a bucket load of money that we can spend on building a new mosque or something, I don't know, for the community. Best practice, they call it. In 2023, Wales became the first UK nation to introduce a default 20 mile per hour speed limit on restricted roads. A report last year, this is where you realise that the newspapers are in cahoots, and this is the Times, so you know that they're in cahoots with this. A report last year showed casualties have fallen by more than 10%, and initial polling suggested it was unpopular. Initial polling. Of course it's bloody unpopular. You talk to anyone in Wales, they say it's a nightmare. In England, many of London's roads have a 20 mile an hour speed limit, but in rural areas, the rollout has been more limited. Well, good. We don't want a 20 mile an hour speed limit in country roads. We don't want a 20 mile an hour speed limit in the country. You don't need it. You're not going to save any lives. You're just going to slow everything down and make everybody even more annoyed than they already are. I live in a remote village, says Lorna, with a single track road. 20 miles an hour would cause mayhem. We will have to pull over for tractors. Yeah, exactly right. It's complete madness, and it has to stop. This anti-car kind of paranoia is ridiculous. Low speeds block DPF filters and cause problems, says Leyland. What's a DPF filter? It was Miliband who told everyone to buy diesel cars. Look what happened, Mike. Yeah, Russell, you're absolutely right. He did when he was Environment Minister. I think it was in Gordon Brown's government, wasn't it? Oh, you get so tired of just having to fight the man all the time, don't you? Because that's what it is. This is just more government overreach, more governments telling you what to do, how to drive, how to behave, when to walk, when to stop, when to salute. I was a bus driver in London for 30 years. Even the buses had limiters fitted. Crazy. Is that what a limiter is? Yeah. Many drivers these days are incapable of driving at the speed limit, so 20 miles an hour means 15 miles an hour. It only takes one. Well, I get stuck behind these bozos all the time. It's ridiculous. It's got to stop. So let us know if anybody in your area is starting to put up signs that say 20 miles an hour. One tyre touching not over a yellow line in a car park disabled bay, photographed at a warning sign, and I got a £60 charge, says Roy. Yeah, I know. It's shocking. Absolutely shocking. Anyway, I could talk about this all day, but we've got to talk to other people. So that's my meltdown. Let's talk to Chris Rose, who's here. Chris, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Morning.
Good to see you. It's a very strange time at the moment, isn't it? And I know you've been as active as many of us have been on Twitter about the poor, terrible situation surrounding Anne Widdecombe last week, and the complete and utter cock-up by the police in Devon and Cornwall, who have now been taken off the case because they were so bad. I mean, how we've gone from it being nobody political and not an extremist and not a terrorist to Widdecombe suspect may have targeted other MPs, which is now on the front page of the Times. I don't quite know. I mean, how can they be this incompetent, the police?
I mean, sadly, it's not really surprising given the state of other police areas that we've seen do exactly the same thing over the time. because we had the same thing with Henry Nowak. We had the same thing with the police in Birmingham, who lied about the fact that one person being assaulted was apparently a fight to them when it turned out it wasn't at all, because we saw the footage.
Yeah.
And so this time, when they say don't speculate, it's absolutely right that we did, because it's not disrespectful at all, because many of us absolutely loved Anne Widdecombe to bits.
Yeah.
But we could tell that something was not right about what they were saying. They dismissed the fact that it was politically motivated. They said that it had nothing to do with any kind of domestic terrorism. And that's turned out to be true. And as you say, they did say that they potentially could have targeted other Reform MPs.
Yeah.
So when Nigel Farage speculated and said, oh, it looks like it was politically motivated, he was absolutely right. I mean, he's leader of a party, and he gets what the Times reported that he had over, 1,500 death threats since February this year alone.
Right.
So he understands the death threats that MPs get very well, unfortunately, from his own experience.
Yeah.
So he's looking after his own MPs, as he should be, as a leader of the party, saying, you know, I don't want any more of my representatives to be hurt. We should take this seriously. And, you know, I absolutely appalled that other party leaders said that he was just having a hissy fit when he got angry at Sky News because they went up to his daughter's home. And I thought, you know, that anger is absolutely justified, given the threats that his security, that his family can have.
Well, I think it's disgusting the way that he's been treated by other politicians and also by, you know, the mainstream media, in particular Sky News and Times newspapers and the Daily Mail as well, with Dan Hodges, with these constant attacks on him. Because even if it wasn't justified, which it isn't, you know, you'd have to consider that you know, people will act and perhaps be enraged if you keep telling them that one particular party leader, one particular individual is a bad guy. You'll then get other bad people who might wish to do them harm as a result.
Absolutely, and there's a constant demonisation of reform that I never really saw with Tory MPs in the past. And as you say, people like Dan Hodges, they're constantly attacking reform, constantly. He's probably wrote about 20 tweets by now in the morning already. Yeah. I mean, the guy is a bit of a lunatic now. I used to like him, but he's just frankly gone off the edge now. I mean, it's absolutely disgusting. And it shouldn't really take Nigel Farage to be hurt, because he's already had milkshakes thrown at him for people to take it seriously. And like I say, I mean, when he did a single tribute to Anne Widdecombe, because not only were they close friends, they were also colleagues as well, because she was the justice spokesperson. It was absolutely normal for a party leader to do a tribute at the crime of the scene. There was no political message around it, but they attacked him for doing that, saying he was using his death for political reasons, and they actually wasn't. And these are the same people who had no issue with Labour MPs doing it for Joe Cox, or the Parliament using David Amess's rder to push the online safety bill. That was using it for political reasons. But when Nigel Farage does a single tribute, they, you know, absolutely go berserk and attack him for it. And I don't think journalists would have the same issue if Labour MPs did it for a Labour MP who had been murdered. They wouldn't say, oh, they're using it for political reasons. They would absolutely be talking about left-wing extremism. We would just have the conversation would be completely different. A Labour leader wouldn't be attacked in the same way that Nigel Farage is being attacked right now.
No. Well, I mean, we all saw pictures, didn't we? Because they ran them actually the other day of Jeremy Corbyn and David Cameron going to the scene of where Joe Cox was murdered, and nobody ever accused them of you know, trying to capitalise on her death or anything like that, because they weren't. They were just showing respect, as Nigel Farage was. And also all this nonsense about the family, you know, this sort of quote that, you know, a source has told us that the family don't want this business going on. Well, it turns out, as far as we're aware, that the one family member who was close to Anne, who was her nephew, who's a vicar in Cheltenham, I believe, was actually at the ceremony with Nigel Farage and the Reform guys as well. So was obviously very happy with Nigel Farage being there.
Absolutely. I mean, from looking at the pictures, they were well received there. It looks as if everything was smoothly. If family members didn't want them there, I'm sure they would have complained directly, and it wouldn't just be a anonymous source. They would have made themselves very clear that they didn't want it, but we don't see that at all. So I'm very hesitant to believe the press, particularly since they lied about the fact that they said that they didn't go to Farage's house, and then it turned out that they did.
Right.
So I'm very hesitant to believe the press. I'm very hesitant to believe the authorities, because we've seen this time and time again that they withhold information. So why should I instantly believe them? And as you say, there's nothing wrong with what Farage has actually said at all. If any other party leader said the same things under similar circumstances, they wouldn't be attacked in this way at all.
No.
So
Well, there's a reason. I mean, there's a
the press look
reason.
bad.
Exactly. There's a reason why people don't trust the police, and there's a reason why people don't trust the mainstream media. Because they've been telling lies for years. That's the problem.
Absolutely. They've created a society where you're absolutely normal for being suspicious instantly. I would be suspicious if they said, "Oh, we're ruling out all these options" so early on. And it just seemed a bit odd to me to rule them out. So they shouldn't really do that. They should keep an open mind for all this stuff, because if the conversation was reversed, they definitely wouldn't rule out right-wing extremism. We would be discussing it from the get-go. People would be speculating. We probably would have had a conversation in Parliament saying, "Oh, look at all the toxic right-wing MPs saying reform," or anything that the Tories may have said. And, we would have had a big shutdown of any right-wing networks. They would have said, "Oh, we've got to get the prevent on all of us, really, because we wrote a tweet about illegal migration." That would have been the conversation we would have had. So where is the conversation with left-wing extremism? Because a lot of the comments about Anne Widdecombe that we could see in the past were quite toxic as well, including from Labour MPs like David Lammy or Jess Phillips.
Right.
We could say that they contributed to the toxic environment that Anne Widdecombe had.
Absolutely.
Regarded it.
Absolutely. Well, look at Natalie Fleet, who was supposedly the Minister for the Safeguarding of Women and Girls, complaining about Nigel Farage's faux outrage at the murder of one of his women representatives, right? It would be comical if it wasn't so tragic. And she put that statement out after Anne Widdecombe died.
Exactly, and it just shows the mentality that many of them have. And I remember that post very well. She also used the term bin men in a very derogatory way as well, because that's what the party of the so-called working class does now, is that they use these terms in a derogatory way. And, as I say, people like Natalie wouldn't dare write such a post. It was any other party that had been through similar circumstances. So why do they speak about reform in that way? It kind of shows that they do not really care when it's a woman on the right, when they're the subject of abuse or harassment, or in this case, unfortunately, murder. And I just think to myself, is it any wonder that the victims of the Pakistani rape gangs have been treated appallingly by this, party, when this is the mentality they have for certain types of girls, certain types of women? They only seem to care about women and girls when it's politically convenient. Because, when Jo Cox died, I don't remember people going on TV to say, "Oh, we don't care that she's died because she was pro-immigration, pro-Gaza." No one said, "Oh, I disagree with her views, so I don't miss her." Or, look at the Labour leader at the time, using her death as political gains. Nobody said that at all. So why on earth do they think it's okay for them to say this? Why do they think it's okay for the BBC to invite such activists on to badmouth Anne Widdecombe when she's the victim of a murder? It's absolutely appalling, and people can see through this two-tier reporting that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, absolutely right. Well, it's no wonder that there's a story in the papers today saying that 500,000 people fewer now actually pay for a TV license because they don't want to. They don't need to watch that kind of nonsense. They don't wish to see BBC's political propaganda going out day in, day out, where ordinary people are not sort of recognised for what it is that they do. And Stephen Barrett was on earlier this morning talking to us about this whole kind of, visceral hatred of reform and of Nigel Farage, and how it goes all the way back to sort of the Brexit referendum, really. And he was talking about going into places like Lincoln's Inn Fields, which is a sort of, an area where barristers operate, and it's supposed to be, very much the kind of inner circle of the legal business, right? And, relatively well-educated, intelligent people saying the most awful, horrible things about Nigel Farage as if he was the devil incarnate, and an evil, horrible individual, which is so unnecessary and over the top that it's got to stop.
Absolutely, and that doesn't surprise me that they've done that, because I just feel as though ever since Brexit, they've never really forgiven him for winning the referendum.
No.
Because before that, they just thought, oh, he's leader of UKIP, we can keep him at bay, he's not in Parliament. But now, Brexit has happened, he's now in Parliament, and he's topping the polls, so they hate him even more. And there is a visceral hatred of him. You can see from the targets we've had, we can see from the parliamentary committee, which is just used as a political tool for people who they don't like, because they voted against Keir Starmer going there for Peter Mandelson, which was far more serious than anything else.
Sure.
So we can certainly see from these circles, I've personally heard people in professional circles say, oh, they badmouth Nigel Farage, they badmouth reform. The way they speak about working class people as well is absolutely disgusting. Like, they do have views which would actually shock anyone if they particularly heard them. That's just the way they have the contempt they have for working class people, for anyone who has views that they, don't want to stop the boats, they see as beneath them, because these types of people don't really live in areas where they're affected by the diversity which they love and cherish so much. If they live in a diverse area or live near a hotel with illegal migrants in, I don't think they would have the lovey-dovey views that they have. They would certainly understand why working class people have the views that they have, because they experience it more hand.
Well, you remember the panic and the sort of outrage when Reform came out and said, well, if you decide to vote for a Green MP or a Labour MP that wants to bring in more migrants into the country, what we'll do is we'll put those migrants in a hotel in your constituency. And they all went, oh, no, don't do that, because that would be punishing us. Why are you punishing us? You're going, hang on a minute, I thought you said that this was a great thing. Why would you consider that to be a punishment? Surely you'd welcome it, wouldn't you? But no.
Exactly, and it kind of shows that they don't really like it they like it in principle, but not in reality. It's the same thing with the deputy Green leader, Rachel, for the Green Party. She said the similar thing. She welcomed open borders, but as soon as they said, "Oh, we're going to put some in your area," all of a sudden she's like, "Oh no, I've got to find a way to stop this." And I think you should welcome the very thing that you support so you can experience it. I mean, after all, they say it's a right-wing conspiracy to believe that these men are dangerous. So why don't they open them with open arms? I'm sure they could, happily invite them round to their house for tea if they wanted to. That's the type of thing that they're always telling us to do. Like, be happy with these people. So I'm sure they should be. In fact, we shouldn't be the ones who are telling them that. They should be the ones who actively want them in their own area, based on their own political narrative. But like I say, when their ideology meets reality, all of a sudden they back off. And I think it's absolutely tragic and hypocritical of them. That's why I'm glad Reform did that, because it kind of showed the hypocrisy. Even if it doesn't even happen in reality, it just showed hypocrisy loud and clear. And that was what's one of the main aims that it did, and it achieved it very well.
Yes. And I mean, I noticed that by and large, the Mail and the Times have kind of backed off a little bit in the last couple of days. I mean, Hodges is still banging on his Twitter account about it all, but so it's attacking Lucy Connolly now is his latest kind of plan to take her apart, which for some reason he's decided is a good idea. But I mean, I presume that you like me probably think they'll restart their anti-reform campaign once everybody's kind of moved on from talking about Anne Widdecombe, which in my sense will not be for a long time. I won't stop talking about that for a very long time, indeed. But it kind of proves the point that it's an unmitigated, deliberate campaign of propaganda against reform, because it's suddenly stopped, right? Because they've realised that actually it wouldn't look great if they started attacking Nigel Farage now when all of this terrible stuff has happened.
Absolutely. It doesn't really feel like they've even stopped. I mean, it does feel as though people like Dan Hodges have carried on regardless.
But I mean, he hasn't written in the paper for 2 days, which is quite a long time, considering he's been writing like one relentless piece after another, thousands and thousands of words about why Nigel Farage is a bad guy.
Yes, in that sense, they have, briefly stopped, but it still kind of feels as though they're just waiting around the corner, and they're just hoping this will just go away as soon as possible. And I think it's right that Reform MPs do highlight the fact that this environment has created the type of events where a Reform spokesperson can be murdered, and they themselves should absolutely say, this is why we need security. This is why Nigel Farage needs security. And I've already seen people like Dan Hodges say that, so Reform will use Anne Widdecombe's death to deflect from Nigel Farage's and 5 million. It's absolutely not. There is a good argument to say that this is why Nigel Farage needs more security. I mean, if the death of a Reform spokesperson doesn't really ring alarm bells as to why we're living in such a toxic environment at the moment, created by these very people, then I don't understand why they can't see it. Purely for political reasons, because anyone with any sense can reasonably see that when you've been demonized in a party for months over something, and then one of their spokespersons gets murdered, then you have to stop and think, oh, this environment has definitely created it. It's contributed to that. So I just think to myself, if these so-called independent journalists are using it for political reasons, then how could we trust the press when they say, oh, don't speculate? Because everything they seem to do is from their own bias. Nothing is ever, I've not seen them really defend Reform on anything at all. If they're so-called independents, they seem to be anti-Reform constantly. And it's sad to see even some Tories join in as well, because they should absolutely know better, given that some of their MPs have been the victims of death threats as well. They've been the victim of a kangaroo court under Boris, and yet these people have been the most disappointing for me as a former Tory member, and to see them join in with this type of witch hunt as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, good to see you. Good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Chris Rose there, giving us the benefit of his very wise words on Reform and on the way that Reform have been vilified and constantly kind of attacked over the past several weeks. It's noticeable. And Stephen Barrett, I think, pointed this out this morning. We're going to talk to Gawain Towler shortly about it as well. It noticeably kind of ratcheted up after the local by-elections, local elections, I should say, in May, on May the 6th. It seemed to get a lot worse when Reform did terribly well in those elections and garnered a whole bunch of councils up and down the country. That was when it really started to ratchet up, almost as though somebody flicked a switch and said, we've got to stop these guys, otherwise they're going to be running the country. I think that's what's happened. Time for some news with Edward Hughes.
Hello, everyone. Edward the News Hughes here with your Wednesday bulletin. Counter-terrorism police are leading the investigation into the targeted killing of former MP Anne Widdecombe. A 28-year-old suspect remains in custody as officers probe possible links to other attacks, heightening security concerns for politicians, including Nigel Farage, who reports frequent threats. In politics, Andy Burnham is gaining momentum amid Labour tensions, with reports of cabinet manoeuvring as Keir Starmer's position faces scrutiny. MPs have approved the Hillsborough Law, hailed as a major step for justice. On the sports front, Jude Bellingham's double helped England advance in the World Cup. Elsewhere, plans for a midnight social media curfew for 16 and 17-year-olds are under discussion, while pension reforms could see millions working longer. Please remember to like and subscribe. Laters Tigers.
By the way, just as an aside on that story about a curfew for teenagers using social media, how's that going to work exactly? Is that going to mean that after midnight, if you want to go on social media, you'll have to verify who you are? Because nobody's really asking that question. Perhaps we should ask that question, and perhaps we'll find out maybe later on in the show. We'll put that to a couple of people. But just before we talk to Gawain Towler, let's have a look at Prue Leith. She is, of course, Danny Kruger's mother. Danny Kruger, one of Reform's MPs, somebody who came across from the Tory party. Have a look at what she had to say about all this.
I must ask you this, though, Prue, because it's a subject I've been preoccupied with on this show in recent days for reasons you completely understand, the safety of MPs. And one of those MPs is, of course, your son, Danny Kruger. As a mother, seeing all of this that is going on now, you must be worried on his behalf.
Well, I am, to be honest. I mean, he is in reform. But I haven't even rung him up about it because I don't want him... Well, he'll hear this, of course, and say, no, I've been worrying anyway. I don't want him having to add to the worry the fact that his mother's worrying. Because, honestly, I think, the government will do everything it can to protect MPs. And, there are dangers in every walk of life. Yeah. And this is one that the MPs have to have in the back of their minds. Yeah. But it is scary. And, it seems so amazing that this should be happening in the UK, which I've always thought of as the most civilized country about politics. Yeah. It's always been proper, a proper country. They don't reach for the gun when you don't enjoy somebody else's, don't agree with somebody. You debate it and you vote on it, and it seems amazing that what happened to Anne Whittingham happened in this country.
It does. Prue Leith there talking to Times Radio. It does seem extraordinary, doesn't it? Although she says, there are dangers in every walk of life. Well, I don't think there are quite as many dangers as there are if you're the leader of the Reform Party, because as we say earlier today, 1,577 threats against Nigel Farage have been made since February, including 597 death threats. Let's talk to Gawain Towler from Reform and see what his take is. Gawain, very good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, good morning.
I saw, we played a little clip of yours earlier actually today. Because just you talking about the police and the perception of the police as sort of a mess that they made for themselves in Devon and Cornwall. And I'm happy to say that I think, and you may or may not agree with me, but I think Lawrence Taylor, the guy who's now running the investigation, seems to be a much more capable individual as the head of the South East.
Didn't he come across well outside
I thought so.
Scotland Yard?
I thought
Didn't
so.
And he said much as what I was talking about. He said, "This is where we're at. We're not going to speculate.
Yeah.
We'll give you more information when we have it. Thank you."
Yes,
no
and
more
I
questions.
think that was. I mean, it was almost as though I hate to use the phrase "the grown-ups have taken over," but clearly Devon and Cornwall hadn't got a clue. And as you quite rightly pointed out,
are virtually in special measures.
Yeah. Well, they were until last year, weren't they?
Yeah. I think you're right. I mean, he did come across as an extremely impressive man, and it's strange, isn't it? Four sentences, and you feel that you're in safe hands.
You really do, because there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason for what they said, and as you said, giving the impression certainly that we can't trust them because they sort of apparently ruled certain things out when they had no business doing so. Because, one of my first questions on Saturday was, well, surely if counter-terrorism police have been involved in the arrest of this guy in Rotherham, why are they ruling out the fact that it might be related to terrorism? It doesn't make any sense apart from anything else.
Well, it just seemed, as I said, it seems like they were trying to manipulate the narrative rather than actually get on with the job. And they didn't need to. They just didn't need to. And the problem is we have become so untrusting of the police that this sort of behaviour just redoubles that lack of trust. I don't know. It just seems, well, I've been doing a survey and I'm FOIing every single police force in the country, or dare I say service, as to how much they spend and how many people do they employ doing their PR. Because it looks, if the officers on the ground, the people doing the investigation, both in Devon and in Sheffield, and that moment in Newton Abbot, are doing the job well. They seem to be doing the job well. They pick the guy up fast. They're doing the investigation and doing it well, and one must applaud that. But what we have is a officer class, a sort of the generals, drowning in public relations, speaking as if the College of Policing has written their brief, and they are the ones who are losing the faith and trust of the people. And it is because they didn't rule out investigation into terrorism or political motives, but the way they couched the words gave the impression that they had. Because they wanted people to stop thinking in that way, because that is bad thinking.
Right.
The problem
what's interesting, well, let me ask you this. Well, let me ask you this, because in Southport, for example, you could see very clearly, because of the way the College of Policing teaches them how to operate, that they would want to kind of, disguise the fact that the killer was in fact, not a migrant. But so they put out this narrative that he was Welsh and that he was from the South Wales area and that he was a schoolboy and all of that. And you can see why they would not want people to think it was a migrant or the son of a migrant, for example. But in this case, what were they trying to conceal exactly? Did they not want people to think that there was such a thing as left-wing extremism?
Well, there's a couple of very odd things about this. Firstly, we found out on Friday morning, did we not, that she had died.
Mm-hmm.
However, I was informed on Thursday evening that there were at least 50 police at her house after she had, and I was informed that she had died beforehand.
Yeah.
You don't have 50 police for somebody slips up in the kitchen. They knew she was murdered before they announced that she had died.
Yeah.
And yet, so why did they do it like that?
Well, see, I've been told that they didn't inform. I've been told they didn't inform anyone that she'd been murdered until Friday. I don't think when they informed people that she had died on because there were certain people who were informed on Thursday, who were okay, and so but you weren't aware that she'd been murdered.
I was by Thursday evening.
Oh, were you? Okay. Well, that's news to me.
Because I was told by somebody near there that over 50 police were searching her house.
Right.
That does not happen for an old woman who falls on her kitchen
No.
floor.
But what I'm saying is you weren't told, but you weren't told officially by the police that she'd been murdered.
No. Well, at that point, we hadn't been told she'd died officially.
Yeah.
So the
but
police
what
were
I'm
aware
saying,
she'd
no,
been
but what I'm
murdered
saying is that
before
some
they
people,
announced it.
but some people had been told, Gawain, is what I'm saying, and members of the family and others, but they hadn't been told she'd been murdered either.
No. But I then was informed on Thursday evening that over 50 police were at her house.
Mm.
So, to my mind, that suggests that the police were well aware she was murdered.
Indeed.
A good 8-9 hours before they announced she'd died.
Yes. So why would they not announce that she'd been murdered? That's the key question, and that's one of the questions I was asking on Sunday, for example.
Going back to what you were saying with Chris just now.
Yeah.
This business about finding a family member. Do you recall after the Henry Nowak judgment that his sister put on her Instagram a clip of Robert Jenrick talking about the Nowak case?
Mm.
The next day it was removed because the family didn't approve. Well, or is it the family, or is it that unit at number 10 that tried to manipulate? It's like the nudge unit, but that tried to manipulate public responses.
Yeah.
That unit exists.
Yes.
And so one wonders if this is, I mean, they literally find people to close down public debate, public interest, and in fact, advise families what they should and should not do in the circumstances.
Yes. Well, in fact, what was interesting...
all about manipulating the message.
Yeah. Well, what was interesting about the Henry Nowak case was that every sort of commentator who was against reforms highlighting of the case, or anybody else's highlighting of the case, and any kind of messenger that might have said something critical of the police or in any way, shape or form, were quoted Henry Nowak's father's speech outside the court. But the father outside the court didn't say, I don't want people to talk about it. You know, he did say that he didn't want it to be used as a political kind of, piece of apparatus. But that's not the same thing. That's not the same thing. He wasn't trying to stop people from talking about it.
I mean, he was actually quite clear about that.
Mm.
And as I say, his Mr. Nowak's sister posted supportively a statement made by a reform politician, and it was up for about 12 hours, and then it was taken down.
Mm.
Why was that?
Yeah,
we don't know. And I can't judge her motivations, and she might have been embarrassed by it, and she might not have been pressured or suggested in a quietly in her ear hole. We don't know, but it all fits a pattern, doesn't it?
Yes.
And
very
this
much
is the
so.
thing. This is the thing here. Southport, Nowak, Ogilvy up in Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
What was the great upset of the government? Not that it had happened, that people had videoed it and shared it on social media. That was the great upset.
Yes. Well, this was what the police...
Another attempt to close down social media. And yes, the idea that one could have a voluntary curfew. Do you know what, Mike? I can have a voluntary curfew on social media by going to bed and putting my phone down.
Yes.
I don't need the government to do it.
No.
What's more, the government can't do it. It's
exactly. Well, exactly. But I mean, but again, this curfew that they talk of, how is that going to work exactly? Are they suggesting that anyone who wants to use social media after midnight is going to have to register themselves in some way, shape, or form?
It's a voluntary curfew.
Well,
which means you don't have to register it. It's just prepreposterous.
Yeah,
it's worse.
Well, it's a bit like the guidance that the Department of Transport have given out today to rural councils to reduce the speed limit of country roads to 20 miles an hour. It's voluntary, You don't. It's not binding, but you can bet your bottom dollar they'd all do it.
Well, look at Wales.
Yeah.
And how wildly popular that policy is in Wales.
Well.
And if you go round, it's interesting. I drive around the country a lot because I do public meetings and stuff. Basically, don't go to places that have got a Lib Dem council.
Yeah.
Not only do they charge you for putting up flags or tear down your flags, as they did in Portsmouth last night, but they also have 20-mile limits everywhere.
Right.
It does seem to be a Lib Dem fixation. But of course,
can you explain to me, by the way, why, given that England are playing in the World Cup, that in England you can't put up an England flag to celebrate England playing in the World Cup?
Yes, because it is. I can absolutely explain to you. It's very simple, Mike. It's that the English people are bad people. And celebration of the English is a proof of your inherent moral turpitude.
But it's all right if you're in. But it's all right if you're in a sort of a box park, throwing beer around and jumping about because the goal's been scored. That's okay.
In a contained, regulated space. I want to see that council block in Portsmouth. Somebody to put up 5 flags outside on their balcony. You know, not in the way of traffic. It's on their balcony.
Yeah.
And the middle one being a Black Lives Matter one.
Yes. Would you have the rainbow flag as well?
So a Black Lives Matter flag in between 4 England flags, and see what the council do then.
Oh, that would be good. Well, what about a rainbow flag in the middle of the 4?
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure that would be fine.
That would challenge them. You can see the poor council pettifogging operatives sitting there and almost having a sort of a brain aneurysm, not knowing what to do next.
Right. Yeah, I know, absolutely. They'd be paralysed by their own turpitude. But I mean, somebody sent me a picture the other day, which we put up of the MI5 headquarters, which is not a million miles from Westminster. They have 3 flagpoles, 2 flagpoles, no flags at all, 1 flagpole in the middle with the rainbow flag of LGBT. And you just think, this is MI5. I mean, what chance have we got?
And after all, I'm sorry to say, but wasn't that, if you think of the Philby Blunt McLean case,
yes.
If you think of many of the problematic issues with traitors who were spies, there's a common thread going through a lot of it, isn't there?
There is, I'm afraid, yeah. Not to mention the guy in the bag, whose name I forget. But
Andrew.
Yes, Andrew somebody. But let me go back just to the Nigel Farage sort of death threat story as well for a moment, because you've been associated with Reform, you know, for many years, and in previous incarnations as well. I mean, do you fear walking around? Do you worry about people who will do you harm in some way, shape, or form out in public?
Honestly, until last night, I hadn't. But the reportage in the Times, for the first time, I had a little back squeak of concern. But literally, until last night, even after Anne, what happened to Anne, because frankly, who the hell am I? I'm nothing. I'm nobody. I'm a tiny little cog in a far bigger wheel. But, and this is part of the problem I think Reform have, and it's not of their doing, it is just a fact. If you really have a hate on the Lib Dems, or you despise Labour, or indeed the Conservative Party, there is an awful lot of them to go round.
Yeah.
So the threat is diminished. But because with Reform you have 7 now, Nigel is standing in a by-election, but 7 MPs, you've then got a small handful of others. There's only about 20 of us who are public figures, really, at this point. Though that is growing with Scotland and Wales and the councils and all the rest of it. But I don't know if you're aware, Mike, that last weekend, 2 of our elected members of the Scottish Parliament, the Holyrood members, had to have police called to instance where they were under threat.
I didn't know that.
It's not really been reported.
No.
Well,
I spoke to Russell Quirk this week, and he's now a councillor in Essex, and he said that a lot of the female Reform people, I presume he meant councillors, are very worried for their own safety.
Well, they are, and also, and it is a sad indictment of our modern society. I love this, that all our demands for equity and equality have resulted in a far more dangerous situation for women. And I don't know what the answer to that is. Of course, we want equality and all the rest of it, but it does seem to create a coarsening of society. And the idea, I was brought up, you never hit a woman sort of stuff. Just wouldn't, just not, just couldn't. That was just how it was. And that is no longer the case, I fear. But there's no doubt that women, particularly in politics, but not just in politics, get a far, far worse deal than men on social media. Not only do they have the political vileness and the anger, the contempt, and the insults and the threats, but they also have it sexualized, and it is far worse for them. So I get death threats. I've had them for years, but I've always considered them small, sad people sitting in their grandparents' bunk. However,
but what Reform are now saying, though, according to this piece in the Mail, is that many of the death threats that they're getting are regular death threats from regular people, the same people, kind of what they're describing as kind of fixated people, fixated with the idea of killing him.
And sadly, I'm now, in the last year or so, I've moved from just having deranged lefties having that sort of approach. I'm now starting getting quite a few threats from the hard right.
Yeah.
I am in some way a race traitor, and I will get my comeuppance, and I will, and that has disturbed me. I publicly am pro-Israel, and I've got quite a lot of that too.
Yeah.
So when I read that front page of the Times last night for today's Times, for the first time ever, I did have a tiny, tiny concern because, yes, I find myself, because I've done lots of media in the last year or so, I am recognized now on trains and train stations, walking down the street, having a coffee in the pub, whatever. Hitherto, if I'm perfectly honest, it has been 100% positive. Once somebody came up to have a go, but he had a go in a constructive, meaningful, and actually friendly, discursive fashion. I was perfectly happy to argue my case. So I have hitherto not had a single problem with that recognition. But this does rather give one a slight cause for concern, because those of us who do hold strongly held views, no matter how politely we present them, are demonized, are abused, and that demonization for a very small minority of people can trigger appalling behavior. And the problem is if there's something strange about society, that those on the left seem to believe that they are in some ways morally good because they're good people, because they care about progressive things, whereas those on the right are in some way morally fully human because they don't share those same views. So there's this sort of dehumanizing aspect to many of the left's viewpoints, and that's sad.
Yeah, it is, and it's really, really worse than sad in a way, because it is worrying and it is dangerous, and it is something that I think, as Danny Kruger's mother, Prue Leith, was saying, of course she worries about it, and I imagine lots of mothers would worry about people who are working in reform.
I have had a couple of people who I've known all my life who have in the last few days, are you all right? Messages, are you sure you're okay? And it's not because I'm upset about Anne, though I am. It's more, are you making sure that you're secure? I suspect, as a child, if I barked my knee, if I tripped over and clattered into something, I was fine until somebody said, are you okay? And that's when the tears would come. And in a similar way, sort of bland indifference to the world, or not so indifference to the world, but sort of a refusal to take much of the world that seriously, has protected me from concern. But when everybody else starts coming to me and saying, are you safe? Well, yeah, I think so. And suddenly one starts to think about things one has chosen not to think about before.
Yeah, very true. Gawain, well, good to see you. Thank you very much for dinner. I don't want to have to start ending these conversations with look after yourself, but it sort of feels like you.
Fine.
I'm sure you are. I'm sure you are. Listen, but it's a concern. Great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Gawain Taylor there, talking to us about what it's like to be in reform right now, because it's a terrible question to have to ask people, but it's a question I'm now going to be asking people, I think, as I get them on to talk about the current state of affairs, because, as he says, the front page of the Times this morning, Widdicombe suspect may have targeted other MPs. Police exploring if attack was part of a wider plot. And so you start asking yourself, well, Is it really something that we should be concerned about? And if you're in reform, of course it's something you should be concerned about. And if you're tangentially connected to reform in some way, if you're a councillor or if you're a staffer of some kind, or if you're working at their headquarters, would you be concerned about it? You know, and we shouldn't have to talk about this, but we are, because we do. Much more for us to do. Any super chats to do, or?
This television first, then come back to that.
Should we do that? All right, well, coming up after this, we'll speak to Howard Cox. Back in a second. This video is sponsored by Tally Money. I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by CEO and founder Cameron Parry. Cameron, very good morning to you. Nice to see you. Tell us what Tally Money is.
Well, at Tally Money, you get a savings account powered by gold. So we give you a sort code and account number in your name, just like a normal bank account, but instead of sitting in pounds, you now have milligrams of gold that we brand as Tally.
Okay. And how does it actually work sort of day to day? Do you check the gold price every day? Do you need to do that? How does that?
We use the spot price, what's called the spot price in gold, and that updates every minute. It's a live price. We don't charge any premiums or FX margins on anything on that. You just go about your day as though it was any other mainstream foreign currency, except that you see all your transactions in real time and you're not getting charged, you know, international transaction fees and things like this.
Okay, so if I move some of my money into Tally because I've just opened an account, what happens to it? And is it one of those things that I'll just be watching all day to go, ooh, look what's happening today?
You might do, but you've probably got better things to do with your time, to be honest, Mike. I don't actually think about the little movements in price, because I know over time that on average it goes up more than 12% per annum, and it has each year for the last 10 years. You know, bank savings products or current accounts just can't compete with that at all. But the main thing is my money's sitting there. It's my direct ownership of an asset. When I use my Tally card, you know, in London to buy a cup of coffee, the merchant still gets pounds.
Yeah, okay. To find out more about Tally Money and for a special offer for viewers of the Mike Graham Show, simply scan the QR code or click the link in the description right here. Coming up to very nearly 9 o'clock in the morning. And we're going to be talking coming up later to Ken Blackwell, who's here to talk about CPAC, of course, which starts tomorrow. Well, in fact, it starts today, I think. I'm right in saying. Laura Perrins is here as well. Connor Tomlinson also coming up in the last hour. Super chat from Robert. Thank you very much indeed. Another one from Robert. That's very kind. Thank you. Let's talk now to Howard Cox, who I spoke to just the other night on another show. Howard, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. How are you, mate?
Yeah, not great. Still not great, really. I mean, it's still difficult, isn't it? You've spoken about this before, and we'll speak about it some more now. It's still hard to believe, isn't it? And now watching what the papers are saying this morning about the fact that the police are now investigating the possibility that this character, this suspect, may have had other targets in mind. Just talking to Gawain Towler there, you know, I mean, politics is starting to become like quite a dangerous business.
Well, Gawain summed it up. I've known Gawain for a long time. You know, as you know, I was a member of Reform, and I stood in 2 elections for a Reform, and I still got a lot of good friends in Reform, and I worry about them. I worry about what they're doing. You actually said things about staffers. There's a lot of good people work their butts off for political parties, and there are quite a lot in Reform, and you know they're probably watching their backs and where they walk and where they go because they don't have the security like the top, the leaders do, and so we have to be careful for all parties. I don't care whatever party you're in. There's no excuse for targeting someone and murdering them and battering them to death.
No, I know. And I mean, I certainly know from talking to people in Reform that quite often they'll go to an event and there'll be some demonstration outside and nobody minds a demonstration outside, but you just now will be looking at them slightly differently, I suspect, and wondering whether those people are likely to be extremists, left-wing extremists, nutters, crazy people. There's no way to know, is there?
No, there isn't. This was all new to me, even in my old age. When I stood down in Dover for Reform, I went to a hustings in a sixth form college, and there was about 400 or 500 youngsters all giving questions. And on the way out, I was buffeted by people. It wasn't violent, it wasn't all that sort of thing, but I was definitely manhandled as such on the way out. And I was not used to that. And you think about that's probably the lower echelon of actually being abused in this political fray we're seeing on a regular basis. It's now stepped up a massive load of gears into murder.
Yeah, and if it was dismissed to some extent by so many people initially, wasn't it, on the left, largely. But equally, some Tories as well were quite dismissive of Nigel Farage's concerns. I mean, we can now see why he was so angry. And when he came off the plane that day, when he'd found out that Sky News had found his daughter and gone to her house, because clearly here's a guy who's been getting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of death threats in the past 4 months.
Well, he's had them for all his life, I think, right in his political life, especially from, anti-Brexit idiots and that sort of thing. But, all I can say from a personal point of view is that when you step into the political front, and especially with him, he's probably the most renowned person and face in British politics. He's known around the world. He's known hugely in the US as well. The guy, I feel for him big time. I know we don't see eye to eye on certain things, but, to cut a long story short, I just wish him well. And the government should protect all of these politicians. And to hear Lindsay Hoyle saying they're doing everything, well, I don't believe they are doing everything.
No, they clearly aren't doing everything, because not only did the parliamentary security team pull security from Nigel Farage 2 days after Charlie Kirk was shot dead, but they don't appear to have answered any of his previous questions about whether it's going to be returned or improved in some way. Now at least he gets to have a meeting, I think, with the people involved, thanks to Shabana Mahmood saying that he could do that. But he's quite rightly said, well, maybe we also need to extend it beyond just the MPs.
Yeah, and the police have got to get their act together, for God's sake. We're looking at a situation. They lie to us about things. They try to divert what was happening and what happened to Anne, etc. They should just simply said, our inquiries are progressing. We're not sure what happened yet. That's all they had to say, and people would have actually, And you've said beautifully, or several times. I've seen your show for last week, and you said some great things about the fact is we got to speculate. We got to push things to make sure the police are going down the right avenues. Because I spoke to a good friend, the policeman, a couple of nights ago, and he's embarrassed by his own profession at the moment. They're not doing enough for people and not actually catching criminals as such. All they're doing, he's even being told, to make sure he goes easy on ethnic minorities. These are the sorts of things that we don't hear much about, but it's the truth. He said that's the truth. And he's a sergeant, and so he's quite senior in the lower echelons of the police.
Well, we found out, didn't we, in the Henry Novak case, that certainly Hampshire police had an issue with ethnic minorities, that they had actually got an instruction to treat people differently. And that was when we famously had David Lammy, the supposed Justice Secretary, telling us that equality doesn't mean treating people equally. And you kind of go, well, you reinvented the English language now.
Well, he's also the one that says that, a man can have a vagina, or whatever it was he said.
A cervix,
Yeah, I mean, this stupid man and the stupid people, good riddance to them. But we've got more to come with Andy Burnham coming in next week, being coronated without, totally undemocratically. I mean, what the hell's he's going to bring? I just hope he puts more police on the beat, and he actually gets police away from out of the desk policing tweets and getting on to catching criminals. That's what people want.
Yes, exactly. But that's what they're for, isn't it? You shouldn't have to say it. You shouldn't have to. It's a bit like saying, the traffic lights are supposed to go red, orange, green. You shouldn't have to say that. Police are supposed to arrest the bad people. I mean, we've got. I don't know if we can play that clip of the shoplifter. This is not really apropos of the police necessarily, but this is the kind of thing that's happening. And I would say it's happening as a result of there not being enough police around. Have a look at this.
Hey.
I mean, I imagine that's the sort of thing that's going on. That was in a Waitrose, right? It's going on probably up and down the country, everywhere you look. Kudos to those people for fighting the guy off. But he was literally going to push an entire trolley of stuff out of the shop.
And he looks as though he's hard done by, then spitting at them at the end. There.
Yeah.
I just can't believe the attitude of these people that we're importing and this Labour government are encouraging to come in. I suppose he's going to vote Labour, I suppose. That's why he's coming in, is it?
Well, I mean, who knows? I don't know who's voting Labour, but I mean, somehow Sadiq Khan keeps winning London. But I mean, that's another...
Don't go there.
I'm sorry to mention his name. Let me ask you about another story we've done this morning, which is a piece in the Times about how apparently the Department for Transport is issuing a dictum, which is not a compulsory, but it's voluntary to local rural councils to say what we should do is turn our country roads into 20-mile-an-hour speed zones.
Well, here we go again. I mean, a quarter of our roads are already 20-mile-an-hour limits around the country, and but equally, you know, we've got lanes. You know, the lanes around where I live and where you live. You know, they're 60-mile, not the restricted zones. I can understand them going down to 30 or 20-mile-an-hour, but not on the dual carriageway. There's a dual carriageway going up the A21. You probably know it.
Yeah.
You know, near Flimwell. Those places, there's a dual carriageway there, which is actually part of the dual carriageway on the outer lanes has actually been now covered in bollards to stop people going down it.
Yeah.
And it's now got 20-mile-an-hour on the bloody
Well, this is
thing.
what they're talking about doing. They're saying take out on what they're regarding as country roads. So I don't think they're talking about dual carriageways, but take out the white line in the middle, right? Put more bollards in to slow people down. I mean, it's actually hazardous, isn't it? It's going to cause more accidents than solve problems.
Well, there's several things about the 20-mile. I've spoken and written articles about this. One is that on a lot of cars who haven't got limiters or you know, controlling their speeds, they have to keep looking at the speedometer, so they're not looking at the road. And so we've got this situation also at 20-mile-an-hour. You're in the wrong gear and you're giving out more emissions. It doesn't equate to any common sense. And the University of Belfast, they've actually done research to say, and in Wales they've done this, I understand, whereby saying, which is actually riddled with 20-mile-an-hour speed limits. Apparently, there's the actual, in terms of confrontations, in terms of accidents and damage to people, etc., is not as beneficial as they seem to think it has become. And this is the issue about it. We should actually, you know, police dangerous driving, not speed limits at 20-mile-an-hour. It's the dangerous driving that does it, and something like only 17% of all accidents involve speeding.
Yeah, I mean, that's the ridiculous thing. I mean, I had that problem. I came back from holiday, right? And having been in Cyprus for a few days, it was beautiful. The roads were amazing, no potholes, you know, clear, no traffic. It was like joyous, even though I was driving a crappy, like a high car, you know, but it was really nice. I came back, got the car at Gatwick, get into the car, get onto the M23. And as I was about to get onto the M25 closed. And it was like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. M25 closed. So I had to go all the way up through South London. And you're right, because I noticed, because my car goes quite fast, I had to go 20 miles an hour all the way through these deserted streets of London because I didn't know where the next camera was going to be. And I know that you can get warnings and all of that, but you still don't really know, because I don't even know, for example, those big high cameras they've got, do they measure your speed, or are they just looking to see whether you're using your phone?
Well, to be honest, no one seems to know, but I think they are actually interfering with our lives and checking on where we go, what we do. I mean, everywhere, everything we do, etc. The point is, there are cameras galore in every junction now. And the 20-mile-an-hour is absolutely insane. Obviously, you know, they should have speeding limits outside schools and certain hospitals.
Yeah, and I think everyone agrees with that.
Yeah, but the 20-mile-an-hour going down a dual carriageway at 2 o'clock in the morning,
right,
is actually effing stupid.
It is. Well, Westway to me, I mean, my sister lives in America, right? As I mentioned her quite a lot. And she goes, she's got some friends who live out in West London, and so whenever she comes to London, the last time she was going out and she got a cab, and she rang me from the cab. She's like, "What's going on at Westway?" You know, which is the A40 for those you don't know. Because, you know, when she was living in London, I think it was 60, 65 miles an hour. And it's now 30. And you feel as if you're literally going in a kind of, you know, in a wheelchair down the road.
And you're always looking for as though you're breaking the law. You're always looking for, you know, policemen and cameras and all those sorts of things.
Right.
You should be focusing on the bloody road and try. And it's hard enough to avoid the bloody potholes, as we all know.
Exactly.
Those are the sorts of things that driving is not fun. You remember this going out for a Sunday drive? I can't wait to go out. Now I try and avoid it, and I'm a petrol head.
Yeah. But of course, now then you get somebody who just overtakes you and is doing about 70, and you think, well, that's probably just somebody either in a stolen car or without insurance, and they're going to be fined because nobody cares. Nobody's going to catch them. You know what I mean? It's just the law-abiding citizens that get done.
Well, I know lots of people now. It's a bit like people not paying the BBC television licence, and they because insurance is. I mean, when you actually do go for an insurance claim, the battle you have to try and prove that you were right. You need to be claimed, and all those sorts of things. Everything is against good old Mr. and Mrs. Public, and I'm saddened by the way this is happening. But I am producing a 20-year long-term road user strategy to present to the next budget, so I'll talk to you about that. But we've had 73,000 who've helped complete complete it now and watch this space. But basically, it's common sense.
Yeah, good. Well, we'll look forward to hearing a bit from you on that one, Howard. Good to see you. Thanks very much indeed. Howard Cox there, talking about the madness of the road situation here in this country. A couple of you poking fun at me for mentioning Cyprus. Now, listen, I know that many of you didn't realise that I went away and where I went. I've got some slides if you want to see them. Maybe I'll bring them in later on in the week, and you can see how lovely it was. And not Cyprus, says And. Anyway, listen, we've got time to have a check. Let's check up on the old the poll. Best thing about being ex-Prime Minister is it starting a foundation. I'm surprised that's so low, actually, because if you start a foundation, you make a fortune like Tony Blair. After dinner speaking tour, 25%. Lunches with Lord Ali, 47%. Trips to Ukraine, 21%. Lunches with Lord Ali is obviously the big hit. Let's talk to Kane Blackwell, who's here. Kane, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Good to see you. So we have ourselves now a couple of stories. Ed Miliband may or may not be Chancellor, apparently. According to a piece of the Times today, he's going to be ruled out of that job, which means, I suppose, who's going to get it? Because Rachel Reeves was making a speech, I think, last night, was she not, at Mansion House?
Yeah.
As her sort of farewell to all that scenario. I see with interest that she's now causing 3 firms a day to go bust, right? Despite the fact that she thinks she's saved the economy. Then we've got the coronation of Andy Burnham, who's apparently going to be Prime Minister, by Monday, right? Is that what you think?
I believe so, yeah.
Is there going to be an actual ceremony? Will they sort of handing over of the keys? You remember they used to do this at the Tower of London, didn't they?
I don't think it's that exciting or pompous on circumstance, unfortunately. But no, I think it's just going to be, he'll turn up, Prime Minister will be already out of the house, and
so there won't be a kind of a farewell to all that ceremony from Starmer?
He might give a public address.
He's done a few kind of interviews.
Usually they do.
I mean, he's done a few interviews, hasn't he? I remember when Boris went.
Yeah, exactly.
He got all the staff outside.
Exactly. That's usually what happens.
And he was. But I mean, and he was quite. The trouble is, I don't think anybody wants to see Starmer talking anymore because he's done more interviews in the last couple of weeks than he's ever done. Talking about what his great legacy, and everybody's going, well, hang on, if your legacy is so brilliant, why are you going?
Why are you leaving? Exactly.
Why are you leaving?
No,
right.
Exactly. But, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who becomes Chancellor, who becomes Prime Minister, quite frankly.
No.
Nothing's going to change.
No.
Because the people who are running our country are not the people in number 10 Downing Street or, sitting on the front bench of the House of Commons. It's the people behind the scenes.
Yeah.
It's the permanent secretaries.
Yeah.
It's the people in the Bank of England and all of the institutions and independent bodies that are unaccountable, that are actually the ones with the real power, who the Prime Minister and the government are not able to sack due to the Blairite laws that, Tony Blair passed back in the 90s and early 2000s.
Well, I see that Ollie Robbins is now suing the government, having been sacked by Starmer. So he's costing us money. Even as he leaves office, he's costing us more money.
Exactly, but this is the point, is the Prime Minister doesn't really have the power to sack these people unilaterally.
Right.
Even, at the end of the day, the government has been voted in by the people, regardless if you like them or not.
Yeah.
It should be up to them who is in particular roles in government to get their agenda through and passed.
Yeah.
And if someone then, messes up, it should be up to the Prime Minister to be able to say, we're going to get rid of them. But, this is the problem. And, sort of going on to, what sort of came here to talk about, but this is exactly what we're going to be talking about at CPAC, is the establishment and how we take them on and fight back against them.
Because CPAC is a fascinating organisation, isn't it? I mean, it's known much more in America than it is here. But this is sort of the first thing.
It's the very first time we're doing it.
The first sort of version of it, if you like. So tell us what it's about, what the meaning of it is.
Of course. So, as I said before, CPAC has happened in America since, I believe, 1974. Ronald Reagan set it up.
Right.
And for the very first time, it's coming to the UK. It's been to many other places. Australia have one nearly every year. They've had one in Hungary, in Poland, in Japan, South Korea, but we've never done it in the United Kingdom, which is crazy to me and crazy to others, and that's why we've done something about it.
Yeah.
And really, what we want to do, our aim is to galvanise the right behind the key ideas, principles, and messages that we need to take to the electorate, but also that the parties need to hear as well, that this is what the movement wants you to do. These are the policies that you need to start talking about and fleshing out in your next manifestos. things like actually tackling the blob and the state. Also things that obviously immigration is a huge thing in defending our borders, but also talking about how we're going to get growth back into our country and finding new innovative ideas and ways, but also working with business. And that's why we've got people from things like the Bitcoin industry and business itself and lots of different people coming because they're frustrated with the way things are going and they want change.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of the people coming from the US will obviously have a slightly different message, I guess, from what we will have, because things are economically certainly working a lot better there, aren't they?
Yeah.
And that's because of Trump, presumably.
Well, exactly. And I think what our US friends will be saying is, look, you can do it. Things can change because we did it. You know, they were on the precipice of, you know, of quite frankly, hell in my view, if they were electing Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
Quite frankly. And, you know, they chose a different direction. They chose the right direction. And I think people in this country don't understand how dire the situation is in this country because we are poorer than the poorest US state, which is Mississippi.
Right.
In 2000, on average, the average UK household was equal to the average US household. Now we're poorer than the poorest US state. That is crazy. If it wasn't for the City of London in this country, we'd be on our knees. Like people wouldn't have homes, they wouldn't have houses, they wouldn't have jobs. Like this is how serious this situation is. We need to start talking about reindustrializing our country. And that also means scrapping net zero, because if we don't scrap net zero and start drilling North Sea oil and gas and doing all of and fracking, then we can't build factories, we can't make things in this country because it's so expensive to do so at the moment.
And that's the problem. We don't really manufacture anything anymore, do we? I mean, it's the odd car plant, which is probably foreign owned now, right? And maybe a handful of kind of cottage industries, if you like, but nothing. There's no major industrialisation going on. There's no major industry that you could say Britain is now the best at or anything.
Exactly. And I think this is actually part of this wider globalist push of making sort of Britain this sort of financial hub in London, and that's about it. And the problem is what's happened over the years is communities like mine in Sydney Sheppey in North Kent, where, you know, paper industry is big there, but, you know, was a huge importer as well and on the Sheerness docks, but also places where my mum's from in Lancashire, where, you know, you'd have huge industries up there. They've all been decimated because of globalization and because energy prices are so high in this country. You can't get anything done. But
we've
it's
also had the likes of Andy
businesses.
Burnham running Manchester, you know, and he's got this kind of message that he's bringing to us that, you know, well, I've run Manchester, so now I can run the country. But he's run Manchester into the ground. And an awful lot of what he's created, if you like, and many people say it's not even really down to him, but a lot of what he's created is a sort of a bit of a building frenzy of buildings going up, but largely buildings going up created by foreign companies. So the money doesn't stay in the country. And also many of the buildings that are going up are sort of student housing, which again is not really conducive to industry. It's more conducive to just a business which they've made out of nothing, which puts people into debt.
Well, exactly. And this is one of the big sort of, I think, problems with the socialist mindset and their sort of way and idea of getting growth is building things, building houses particularly, or building buildings which aren't actually serving the people that are living around it, particularly somewhere like Kent, where I'm from. We've built thousands and thousands of homes. Have we seen house prices fall? No, we've seen them go up.
Right.
Have our lives got better? No. We've got one of the worst GP to patient ratios in the country in Sydney Sheppey. 4,000 people per GP. Have we had any new GPs come in? No, we haven't.
No.
These are the things that people are feeling and are being ignored about. And we're told that, oh, we must build stuff to boost the economy and to do all of that. And it's not working. People aren't buying it anymore because the facts say otherwise. It's not bringing in growth. It's not generating growth. This country is stagnant. Our economy is stagnant, and we need to change that. But that's also about, you know, things like benefits and everything. Like, there is so much that we have to change about this country. People don't understand that it is root and branch. Everything has to change or nothing changes.
And do you worry that, as I do sometimes, that we've got this sort of left-wing establishment, which I'm sure is you know, very powerful and sort of all-consuming, if you like, but it doesn't represent the country. People say to me, is Britain a left-wing country now? I don't think it is. I think it's still quite a conservative, small C country. And so technically CPAC and what you are attempting to do and represent should be quite popular.
Definitely. And I think, you get outside the M25 and you get outside of the cities like Bristol or Manchester city centre, the rest of the country is small c conservative, it is patriotic, and it cares about this country. And they care about the same values that we're going to be talking about. And that's really important. But you're right, there is this nasty left-wing establishment that sort of demonises anyone who is on the right, who believes in patriotism, that believes in this country. We've seen, what has happened with Anne Widdecombe, and, obviously we are going to be paying tribute to Anne at CPAC on the first day, on Thursday.
Would she have been there, do you think? Was she invited,
I know that she was invited in some capacity. I don't know if she was able to come or not, but, it was... I knew Anne for a very long time because I worked with her at GB News. I worked with her obviously on the Liz Truss show, but I knew her personally as well when, she was very close to David Amos and the Amos family, and I was there.
And she was a Kent MP for 23 years.
Yeah, exactly. She was literally, so the seat next to mine in Maidstone, she was MP for many, many years, and the people of Kent hold deep affection to Anne Widdecombe because she was a conviction politician and cared about her community.
Yeah.
I just think that we have to realise that we are in a fight for survival of our ideas, our culture, our way of life, and that there are people who are evil and want to hurt us and want to destroy everything that we stand for, but even not just our ideas, but us ourselves. And, I think... You were talking to Gwaine earlier and saying that, I think people's families feel worried. I know my family do. My mum's always like, why do you want to do this? Why do you want to go into politics? Why do you want to, put yourself through this? And it's because we care.
Yeah.
Because we care about our country, because we know things can be better and things can change. And if no one does anything, then nothing's going to change.
Well,
and
no.
We're just going to go to hell in a handcart.
And it will just get worse and worse and worse
Exactly.
under somebody like Andy Burnham. Is your message then at CPAC that the right should unite or not really?
Our message is about galvanising the right behind the principles and ideas that are important and that matter. There are some people who are on the right that I would say are not actually small C conservatives. They're probably more at home in the Lib Dems or maybe even the Green Party nowadays. There are certain people who just aren't. But we've got to say that the people who are, of our way of thinking, who actually want to change things, it's no good anymore just saying, I believe in low taxes. That makes me a conservative. Sorry, that's just basic. What people have to understand now is if you were a conservative, you want to conserve this country, but by doing that, you have to change everything because the playing field has been torched. Blair changed it completely, and the Conservative Party and everyone who's come after has not understood that is the case, bar, I would say, Liz Truss is the only one who actually understood that you have to change things and be radical. Everyone else has not done that.
And she wasn't allowed to do it.
Exactly, but that's the point, though, isn't it?
Right.
Like, if we look at history, and history is a great teacher, if we don't look at what has happened and we don't remember and we don't learn from it, don't be surprised when nothing changes or nothing happens. Sometimes people say people have got short memories. Well, I think people are starting to realise that having a short memory in this country hasn't been working.
No.
Sweeping things under the rug hasn't been working. Forgiving people for what they have done to us for years isn't working. We have to change, and we have to be stronger, and we actually have to stand with each other. And we might disagree on certain policies and issues and personalities, but the messages and the principles of what we need to do to change this country must be paramount. And that's what we're going to do at CPAC UK. It opens tomorrow.
Right.
It goes on till Saturday. It's going to be great fun as well. We're really going to have a good time. And, we're
I'm going to have a good time.
You're
I'm going to be
there, Mike,
on a
obviously.
panel, I think it's 2:00 tomorrow with Dan Wootton and Jack is it
Jack Posobiec as well, yeah.
And a woman from Australia, senator from Australia, I think.
Yes, exactly.
Who I don't know too much about, actually, but I must find out about. And you've got, I think last time you were here, you told us we could offer a discount, I think, to...
yes, you've got the discount code that we have sent out to you guys. So, if there are still people who want to get tickets, please do that. Do support and do come along, because it's going to be a fantastic event. We've got some really, really exciting speakers talking about some really exciting issues. It's like all the people you love in politics, all in one room, all talking about the things that you and your friends are talking about, that you and your family are talking about. And now you actually get to hear the people who are going to change this country, hopefully, talking, discussing and coming together.
Great. Brilliant. Kane, well, we'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Indeed.
We should be there. We got a little stand, I think, as well, so look out for it. And I don't know if we got the thing arrived. Do we know, Charlotte?
No, we're getting an emergency one today.
Emergency.
Same days.
Emergency banner being made for our little...
very good.
Because we ordered one and apparently it's disappeared. I mean,
don't worry, I've still got things that need to be chased by UPS.
Yes,
so
no doubt.
UPS, watch out.
Kane, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. We'll be talking to, as I say, Kane and others down at the CPAC conference, which takes place tomorrow and runs all the way through until Saturday. Right now, we've got yet another great guest to talk to, and it is, in fact, Laura Perrins, who is here. I think over in... Is she here?
She's here.
She is here. Laura, very good morning to you.
Oh, I am here. How
Excellent.
are you?
I'm very well. Good to see you. I suppose you're not going to make it over to CPAC, are you, by any chance?
No, although many people have spoken to me about it, and no, I can't get over. It was tempting. If I'd known in advance, maybe,
yes.
But unfortunately not. I will have to follow it online, which is the same thing.
Well, it'll be almost as good as seeing you in person, but not quite. Never mind. So it's a very interesting time to be writing about politics and to be involved in politics, isn't it? Because of the way that the terrible events of last week have sort of affected pretty much everything and cast a shadow over it all. But I think it's also woken a few people up to the realities of where this country is and where people's opinions are taking them, you know?
Yes, in relation to Anne Widdecombe.
Yes.
Yes, I know that Anne was I never met her and I didn't know her personally. But I know that she was a regular guest on your show. I think she came on every Monday.
She did.
And obviously she's been a conservative, for decades, well before I was born. And, the first thing is that when I heard the news, obviously it's just very, very sad. And you think maybe that was a very sudden illness. But then obviously as the week went on, I mean, I've just written something on it now. I haven't published it yet. I mean, it really is a shocking display from Devon and Cornwall police. Isn't I know other people do. I don't generally speculate on instances like this straight away. Not because I'm I don't think others should, but I do like to wait and see just what is going to happen. But the minute they started saying, that this was a burglary gone wrong and actually we've arrested someone in Rotherham, I mean, I think I was speaking to your producer. I was like, this is clearly ridiculous.
Yes.
I live in Ireland, but even I know Rotherham is up there and Cornwall is down there, or Devon and Cornwall are down there. And, nobody's getting in their car, God forbid, to carry out that kind of burglary. And she's such a high profile individual, and it's so the minute they started saying that, you're just wondering what is going on. And then last night, it came out from the I think the Times ran quite a detailed report that essentially, as we know, the counter-terrorism police are involved, and they are now looking into whether or not this was part of a broader plot to target politicians as a whole. So you've gone from burglary gone wrong to possible terrorist plot. I mean, that is a huge escalation. And I think, unfortunately for Devon and Cornwall police, it's just made them look absolutely ridiculous. But it's not just about them, because then when you ask yourself, when people, the great and the good, say, well, why is people don't take, respected institutions such as the police seriously anymore? Our public institutions are lacking. Nobody trusts them anymore. But this is the reason why, because they've handled incidents like this really an awful attack. We don't know yet the details. That is true. It hasn't been declared a terrorism incident, but clearly they're saying a targeted, brutal murder on a high-profile public figure. This is extremely serious. This is an attack on democracy itself. And for the police to come out immediately and say, don't speculate, to try and control the narrative, it just shreds trust in an institution that I think conservatives like you and I, Mike, would instinctively want to have confidence in.
Well, exactly. And the problem is that this increasing kind of what I would call overreach by both politicians sometimes, but also members of our kind of police and other kind of organisations like the judiciary, where they try and silence you and they try and say, well, you can't talk about that because it's a live case. I mean, I spent a great deal of time at the weekend just publicly asking quite a few questions because, speculation is one thing, asking questions is something else. And I think it's quite easy to delineate the two things. And it's quite possible to ask questions without speculating, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I think this idea, and again, I said we had a very one of our most senior politicians over here in Ireland, Simon Harris, who's the equivalent of the Chancellor of Exchequer, although he wears a few hats. There was another brutal murder of an American lady in Killarney last week, and immediately there is a suspect who has since left Ireland in the early hours and gone to Jordan. He's now been apprehended. But again, immediately, because he wasn't, now he is only a suspect and is entitled to due process, but because he was an asylum seeker, first of all, the Gardaí, the Irish police, couldn't name him. And secondly, again, from the Taoiseach to Simon Harris, and there is a parallel, again, you see it all the time in British politics, it's don't speculate, how dare you ask any questions about his background, if people who are pointing out that he isn't native Irish, this is a disgusting attack, this is a disgraceful attack. Constantly you find both politicians and others in positions of authority trying to essentially shut down the debate, control the narrative, and they sort of guilt you into it. How dare you use whatever tragic event it might be to make political points. I mean, this, Mike, is just the most ridiculous thing. First of all, it's an obvious attack on free speech. And secondly, look, it's 2026, guys. Yeah. Twitter exists. It's not something, I don't try not to spend hours on it, but the idea that people aren't going to speculate on huge news stories of really serious public interest, violence against women, violence against a really high profile public figure and politician who is also a woman, is just ridiculous. I mean, it's supposed to be, we're Mike, the Conservatives, we're supposed to be saying, I can't be handling with all this modern technology. Well, that's not me. It's 2026. People go on to Twitter. Yeah, people go on to Twitter and discuss, a vegan sausage rolls. Okay, I mean, obviously, these kind of stories are going to be discussed, and neither politicians nor police, a police officer should be in the position of dictating to us what we can and cannot say. Should people be responsible in what they say? Yes, of course. But I mean, that's not to say that you're all supposed to just log off and not say anything. I mean, if you're not in the other reason why people are speculating is the sense that people aren't in control. The politicians, if you're not in control of your borders and men can come over. By the way, the person wanted for this killing of this American woman in Killarney again came through Britain, didn't have to apply for a visa. This was also reported in the Times, and then ended up going through Northern Ireland and down to the Republic. So people speculate because there is a sense that politicians are not under control of basic things like the border. People speculate in relation to this terrible attack on Widdicombe, because when a police force comes out and says this is a burglary gone wrong, and by the way, we've arrested a guy up in Rotherham, you don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to understand that this is complete nonsense. Right. So stop spinning us stories that are obvious nonsense, and we'll stop speculating. Although
well, exactly, because I mean the idea that it's gone from on sort of Saturday and Sunday, where it was ruled out that there was no, albeit that they said at this stage, but they still said it, that there was no evidence of a terrorist connection, no evidence of a political connection. And then this morning on the front page of the Times, not only is there a political connection, not only is there a terrorist connection, but it may be that this individual suspect had targeted many other people as well, which is actually not only a serious lack of information from the police at the weekend, but it's clearly a matter of public disorder and a matter of public concern that there might be other people whose lives were at risk.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And obviously, issues of security and politicians having personal security is an ongoing issue. Look, it's also sort of basic in that, for Devon and Cornwall Police to come out and rule out both political motives so soon was clearly premature, because you're the police. Yeah. You arrest the person who you think is a person of interest, and then you ask questions. I mean, you can hold them for at least, I think, 24 hours, maybe longer if under terrorist legislation. So they have no business saying we're ruling out this motive and ruling out that motive, because the truth is they don't know. No. They don't know, because you haven't questioned them for long enough. And as you say in the front of the Times came out last night and it's in the BBC. As I said, it's true that it has not been labelled a terrorist offence yet, but they're actually, a line of inquiry is whether or not this was part of a broader plot. So not only might Anne Widdecombe have been targeted for her political views, which is incredibly serious if that's the case. This just incredibly, but then they're saying, well, this might have been part of a wider plot against other politicians. Well, as I said, it's that's serious in terms of the politicians involved, but the broader point is that it's an attack on democracy itself, right? It's an attack on the people who have elected those politicians, whether they be Reform politicians, whether they be Labour politicians. Let's be very clear, a personal attack on any elected representative, wherever they are on the political spectrum, and I really mean that, whether it's a Green MP or a Reform MP, is a very serious attack on democracy itself. And, it would have huge implications to how MPs go about their business. They're already talking about extending the security zone around Westminster. It'll have implications in relation to their constituency work. And, most MPs like to be available to their constituents. So it's very important that the police get this right, that they get the security right, because this is the biggest attack on democracy since the terrible murder of Joe Cox.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I know you might not be able to answer this question, but what could have been the point from the police's perspective in Devon and Cornwall to kind of make out that this was nothing to do with terrorism and nothing to do with politics? What would have been the point of that?
I don't know, Mike, and that would be. I mean, who knows why somebody would do that? Why a police force would do that? Because they can't possibly have thought that anybody would have believed that. In fairness, I mean, think of the incredible misfortune that would have had to, and series of events that would have had to come together for this to have been a burglary gone wrong, but it just happened to be a burglary gone wrong in the home of Anne Widdecombe, who we know lived alone. Which is, I mean, it's a huge personal tragedy. We know that Miss Widdecombe was a woman of great faith. She was a Catholic, so. But the terror and the fear she must have suffered in those final moments is truly shocking. It really is shocking, and it must be terrible for her extended family and her friends and colleagues in the Conservative family. It's just very important now that justice is secured for Anne Widdecombe, and if it's been a really shocking week. From the moment her death was announced until this huge escalation to, possible terrorist plot.
Yeah, no, I know. It's absolutely shocking in so many different ways. But now at least it looks as though, we think anyway, Lawrence Taylor, the guy in charge with the South East anti-terror unit of the police seems to know a bit more about what he's doing. I mean, he already made a statement which was a much more palatable one than anything that came out of Devon and Cornwall, where he just says we're just getting on with it, and they need to.
Yes, yeah. Well, I mean, they should be given the time. I think as we, important questions need to be asked, like we're asking now. But it is also important. These investigations, they can't be easy. One assumes that they are seizing computers, seizing phones, whatever it might be. And the terrorism legislation now, I believe, is quite broad. He has been arrested, I think, it's quite a number of offences. Commissioning a terrorist offence, etc. So the arrest has been made. I'm not sure how long they can detain him. It is generally longer under terrorism legislation. So let's see, conduct the interview, gather the evidence, and let's see what happens. But there's a lot at stake here, especially if it was part of a broader plot, especially if perhaps others were involved. We don't know. Devon and Cornwall police certainly didn't know when they were making, I think, an ill-advised statement far too early. And we obviously don't know, and we have to. It is true that you have to let the counter-terrorism police now do their job. He was arrested on the commission, preparation, or instigation of acts of terrorism, which I think that is a very broad legislation. Let's see if any charges are laid, and bearing in mind, once charges are laid, that the individual is entitled to due process and the presumption of innocence.
Yeah, indeed. Laura, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Laura Perrin's there talking to us from Ireland on the subject of the arrest of this suspect in the Anne Widdecombe case, who has gone from not having any kind of political motive at all to not having any terrorism connections at all to now being possibly somebody who had targeted other high-profile MPs, possibly other Reform MPs, and possibly others, in addition to having a targeted attack on Anne Widdecombe. It's hard to imagine how wrong the Devon and Cornwall police actually got it. But we'll be talking about this, I'm sure, for the rest of the week, as we've been saying so far all this week. And it's Wednesday today, it's 9:42. Time to speak to our next guest. Conor Tomlinson is here, host of Tomlinson Talks. Conor, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. I wish it was under better circumstances.
Well, yeah.
Your last segment, but
it's not been a great week, has it? I mean, it's been pretty upsetting for a lot of us who knew Anne Widdecombe, and also just you've tweeted about it as well. This whole business of the sort of demonisation of Nigel Farage, which has been, to me, very much orchestrated in a manner that's almost trackable, if you like, from the way that. They started on Richard Tice and went for him, went for his taxes, went for his companies, went for his various different connections, then moved on to Farage's money, then his houses, then his daughter's house, then next thing up was George Cottrell. And I know you may not see eye to eye very much with a lot of what Reform want to do, but now we've ended up with a member of Reform's sort of advisory group, if you like, murdered.
Yeah, well, I've got quite a few friends still at Reform HQ, and increasingly they've improved their rhetoric and policy. So it's not that I don't see eye to eye with them, it's that I've always been attempting to discourage them from cowardice and encourage them to courage. And I think at the moment, both with Farage's gamble with the resignation and by-election, with his strong statements in the aftermath of Henry Novak's murder, his sort of statesmanly composure, Zia Eustace war on the media, and now this regrettable moment, this tragic moment with the death of Anne Widdecombe, I think they're showing courage in abundance, actually. And I think what we're seeing is a rerun of the Trump playbook, as Trump himself posted on Truth Social, where first they go for lawfare. They were rifling through, the FBI was rifling through Melania's underwear drawer, and they were subjecting him to all sorts of investigations and charges. You had the famous mugshot, you had the frivolous lawsuit by E. Jean Carroll, and that eventually culminated in multiple assassination attempts, which got one man, Corey Comparatore, firefighter and father, killed in the crossfire. And I think the state knows exactly what it's doing with Farage. It knows it can't win a by-election in Clacton. It probably can't win a general election. And so they want to use lawfare and outsource, via their term, stochastic terrorism, violence to the most febrile, demented ideological minds in the country who've already taken a crack at Nigel, lobbing concrete and milkshakes at him on the campaign trail, hoping that it paints enough of a target on his head that they take him out for him instead. And so I think what's going to happen, Mike, is actually a rerun of what happened with Trump, where this engenders, alongside more credible policy and personnel appointments that Reform have been making, engenders a lot more sympathy towards Reform in the coming months, because the way they're treating everyone in Reform, Farage especially, is just unconscionable.
Yeah. And I mean, I notice, and this is when you know that it's an orchestrated kind of campaign, is because since the stories have started to come out that actually Farage was right about the number of threats that are being made to him, and the number and the fact that this was in fact a targeted attack on Anne Widdecombe. They've all gone a bit quiet with the anti-Farage stuff. You know, suddenly the Times aren't writing it anymore, and suddenly Dan Hodges hasn't been in the paper for 2 days.
Yeah, Hodges is still tweeting proudly about his affiliation with Hope Not Hate. So I don't think Dan Hodges is going to exercise much prudence in the next few days. Let's put it that way. But I did find it conspicuous that Shabana Mahmood made a sort of Potemkin gesture to Farage to say, "Oh, we'll have conversations about security for party leaders again," after they previously stripped his security detail down to the bare bones the day after Charlie Kirk got shot and killed live online. So I just honestly, I think this is the most insidious kind of, if not direct coordination, but a kind of an attitude that we would quite like to get rid of him by any means necessary. And I think the more people that see that, the more people that will grow sympathetic to his plight.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You've been doing some more research into the Fabians, I understand.
Tell well, it's because in the immediate aftermath of that furor around the potential rollback on the extension of indefinite leave to remain from 5 years to 10, which I think was always inevitable. I think that was just sort of the sales pitch to get Shabana Mahmood's immigration changes over the line. People started to pay attention to the new safe and legal routes that she's creating. This was in the original document that was proposed online, but lots of people, you don't get much time to trawl through boring documents. That's sort of the jobs of us political nutcases, I suppose. And so they didn't know that Shabana Mahmood wanted to create brand new charter flight routes for grown men and families from the third world to come directly into our country, including a bunch of Palestinian students who can come over on full scholarships and study at our expense. And they started to publicise this on the Home Office Twitter account. Shabana Mahmood was saying Britain is a generous country. Don't worry, though, we're going to force them to pay back £10,000 of their asylum costs, and they can do that with benefits, so we're still paying for all of it.
Yeah.
The root cause of this was actually a Fabian Society document from June of 2023. The Fabian Society, for people that don't know, were a incremental socialist organisation founded in the 19th century, whose logo used to be a wolf in sheep's clothing, but it's now a plodding tortoise, which I suppose is apropos for Andy Burnham, because he does look a little bit like a cartoon tortoise. And what they want is socialist revolution, but incrementally, through law, through cultural change, through politics. And you had Fabians in the early 20th century, in the immediate aftermath of the Second World War, writing about how they actually rely on the Tories to be a kind of controlled opposition, so that they can periodically pause their revolution when it gets too unpopular. The Tories can get in, but because they're conservatives, they won't actually undo any of the revolution, because they like to conserve things. So they just conserve the last stage of the revolution, and then they can blame the Conservatives for all the inequality and poverty that results, and they can get back into government and resume the revolution. That's exactly what Starmer did after 14 years of failed Conservative government, where Cameron looked indistinguishable from Blair, and they called themselves the heir to Blair. Anyway, this document was published in June 2023, and it was called... it was Lawful and Fair Building a Better Migration System. And in the document, it actually proposes this new safe and legal routes pathways for refugees, asylum seekers, but otherwise people that would be illegal migrants, to come straight into Britain, sponsored by communities. And that means mosques and like activist charities that do DEI, that are again paid for by the taxpayer. And then they can get these training schemes, either as students or as apprentices. They can get jobs, they can earn an income while also claiming benefits. And in the document, it says, in order to build a democratic and popular migration system, well, not everyone has to actually support the policies that we do. It just needs to be democratic because it's accountable to the government. But then what they want to do is they want to decentralise power from Parliament and disperse it across government departments for civil servants. So they want to make it less accountable, less in the power of ministers and more in the power of permanent ideological civil servants. And they want to create a new advocate for migrants' rights in government. So to have migrants collectively barter and bargain at the expense of us, the taxpayers. And the entire document says that you need to remain in the legal straitjacket of the UN Refugee Convention that says millions of people have a right to move to Britain, and the ECHR, because otherwise, if you're breaking international law, it's anti-democratic because you'd be oppressing minorities. So deportations are off the table. So it's clear that even if it's not conspiratorial, the Starmer and now Burnham government are stealing their ideas from the Fabian Society, either because they're unimaginative or because they're socialist revolutionaries. And the plan was always to water down immigration restrictions, like the extension to ILR, and create new safe and legal routes for millions of taxpayer liabilities and criminals to come into the country at our expense.
Yeah, it is extraordinary, isn't it? Because we've seen as well from the activities of this week, one, as you say, the reduction of indefinite leave to remain down to 5 years instead of 10 years, but also with this horrible, ghastly Pakistani child molester and rapist who we supposedly are going to deport, want to deport, but can't deport because Pakistan won't take him back. She's admitted even if they change the law, which could take a year, he probably still won't go anywhere because they don't want him back. And it's kind of like, well, you know, sorry, are you not prepared to do anything about that? Or are you just hoping it just gets forgotten and falls off the end of the news log at the end of the week?
Well, they're not prepared to do anything about it, Mike, because they'll lose all their Pakistani voters that are already hemorrhaging to the Greens and Gaza independence, and because Shabana Mahmood is a Pakistani woman, no matter how much she insists that she is English. She says that Islam is the guiding North Star for everything she does in politics. It's the reason she's called to public service. Who she's exactly serving is a big question. It certainly doesn't seem to be the British taxpayer, I'll put it that way. So, of course, they're not going to leverage things like foreign aid or visa sanctions for Pakistan, whereas she did to 3 minor Christian countries in Africa who provide a spattering of illegal migrants to ensure that they take them back. But Camilla Tominey, actually, I think asked her this question at the press conference where she announced it. She was like, Pakistan's a #1 offender for illegal visa overstaying and even for a time there for small boat migrants. And we know that there are people smuggling gangs that target Pakistani men with footage of British women and girls to entice them to basically market Britain like an open-air brothel to say, pay a smuggler to cross over the channel and you'll be in essentially Islamic paradise. And Shabana Mahmood was saying, well, I won't announce any further measures. And conspicuously, she hasn't. So we could do, as Rupert Lowe has suggested or as Zia Yusuf has suggested, leverage foreign aid, sanctions, visa restrictions. I would just ban all legal migration from Pakistan because there's not one single person we could take that would be worth the rape gangs, and ensure this guy is sent home. And the reason we should send him home as well, I don't know if you've seen the transcript of his trial in 2013, Mike, but he was very honest about his motivations. Because in the middle of the trial, he ripped off his shirt, started tearing out his chest hair, and accused the courts, the police, the media, and the victims' families of a racist conspiracy in league with the BNP, because he said, Pakistanis are the supreme race, not you white bastards. And so he has remained unrepentant for his crimes. That's the reason why the parole board said he wasn't engaging with restorative justice procedures, didn't show any contrition. It's why they didn't let him out earlier in the first place. Now they've let him out. These people feel exactly this way about us. They feel that way about us in Pakistan, or if Pakistanis are in Britain. We just shouldn't have these people here. And any mechanism we can use to send them back, we should use.
Absolutely. And I don't know if you saw a story that was kind of very much under the radar. It was put out by Guido last week, I think it was, where she's apparently signed a deal for 30 million quid, Shabana Mahmood, to an offshore wind company, believe it or not, so that they can use their boats to rescue people in the Channel. Because presumably they're not doing enough to sort of repair offshore wind farms over in the middle of the Channel. So it's a deal for £30 million to use their boats. And you're kind of going, sorry, I thought you were trying to stop this.
Yeah, the easiest solution to this is just to leave all of the treaties that stop us from deporting anyone and to do cross-departmental cooperation between the Ministry of Defence and the Home Office and just ensure that that's the Navy's responsibility. And if they do pick them up, either ferry them straight to a deportation detention camp and stick them on the first charter flight back to Uttar Pradesh or wherever, or just train your gunboats on them and ensure that they decide to turn the dinghies round and go back to Calais quite quickly. But that's if you wanted to solve the problem. And I get the sneaking suspicion, judging by these documents and their actions and their rhetoric, that we need safe and legal routes and that diversity is our strength and always has been, that they don't want to solve the problem. Actually, just the purpose of the system is what it does, and the system is flooding us with foreigners to gerrymander the next election and ensure that we lose our country.
Yeah, so depressing, really, isn't it? Really, but there we are. Connor, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed, Connor Tomlinson there from Tomlinson Talks, with some rather disturbing information, you'd have to say, and particularly with regard to what we all know, really, that they're not trying to stop immigration. They're pretending that they want to stop it, but they're not actually stopping it, and that surely is the point. We're going to have a Pooch's Pooch coming up very shortly. We're very nearly at the end of the show. Kelvin McKenzie, of course, taking over at 10 o'clock, UK Live Online. If you haven't found it yet, You can find UK Live Online now via the website, which is ukliveonline.co.uk, I think it is, isn't it? You want to, if you can flash that up, that might be helpful. I don't know if we can. But meanwhile, have a look at this. This video is sponsored by Tally Money. I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by CEO and founder Cameron Parry. Cameron, very good morning to you. Nice to see you. Tell us what Tally Money is.
Well, at Tally Money, you get a savings account powered by gold. So we give you a sort code and account number in your name, just like a normal bank account, but instead of sitting in pounds, you now have milligrams of gold that we brand as Tally.
Okay. And how does it actually work sort of day to day? Do you check the gold price every day? Do you need to do that? How does that?
We use the spot price, what's called the spot price in gold, and that updates every minute. It's a live price. We don't charge any premiums or FX margins on anything on that. You just go about your day as though it was any other mainstream foreign currency, except that you see all your transactions in real time and you're not getting charged international transaction fees and things like this.
Okay, so if I move some of my money into Tally, because I've just opened an account, what happens to it? And is it one of those things that I'll just be watching all day to go, ooh, look what's happening today?
You might do, but you've probably got better things to do with your time, to be honest, Mike. I don't actually think about the little movements in price because I know over time that on average it goes up more than 12% per annum, and it has each year for the last 10 years. You know, bank savings products or current accounts just can't compete with that at all. But the main thing is my money's sitting there. It's my direct ownership of an asset. When I use my Italia card, in London to buy a cup of coffee, the merchant still gets pounds.
Yeah, okay. To find out more about Tally Money and for a special offer for viewers of the Mike Graham Show, simply scan the QR code or click the link in the description right here. Coming up to 9:56, as I said, we'll be switching over to ukliveonline.co.uk if you're looking for it there. Super chat from Depopo. Ray Roads and Speed get Pooch to search car crash caught live on TV UK. Government fail again. Actually got a note here from Howard Cox who said that he forgot to mention when he was talking to us on the 20 mile per hour policies that £50 million has now been gathered by cash grabbing authorities each year for the 20 mile per hour fines, all of which goes into central government, not onto the roads. Well, that's appalling, isn't it? After 44 years of reading the Sunday Times, I've now stopped, says Richard. Well, you and an awful lot of other people as well, because of the way that they've been moving recently. Amanda says this, Anne was old school, too trusting. She needed protecting at her vulnerable age. Mentally, she was so strong, but physically, she was an elderly lady, unable to defend herself against a physical attack. I think the thing with Anne was that she was like a lot of people who live in rural idyls, as they like to think of them, that they actually enjoy the fact that it's quite safe. They enjoy the fact that they don't have to lock their doors, that they don't have to lock the car doors when they park the car on the driveway. And unfortunately, they normally end up finding out that that's not perhaps the best thing to have done. And Wold says, Cyprus are now doing a new range of budgie smugglers with Mike's face on the front. Only has a small nose for some reason. Very funny. I see what you did there. Wishful thinking. You won't be seeing me in any budgie smugglers, that's for sure. Shall we do a bit of Pooch's Pooch?
Yeah.
Let's have a look. Don't mind.
16-inch classic pink, the Border Collie, held by Jennifer Crack from Pickerington, Ohio. The party started tonight. That is it.
Wow. And see the tooth's coming out there as well. I mean, you'd have to give that 100%, wouldn't you? 100 out of 100 for that dog. Absolutely extraordinary. Fantastic stuff. Lots and lots of you got in touch today, many of you on Substack as well. This one from Karen, who says, actually, it turns out when I put the other picture up, which was the black and white beautiful cat, that was Pugwash. This is one of Anne Widdicombe's other cats. Aloysius is, in fact, a lovely ginger cat. I've literally just seen a correction, so here is the real Aloysius, and she's put the picture there. which is very kind. Thank you very much indeed. One from Jilly, who sent a lovely picture of an owl. I came across this beautiful carving on my walk through one of our parks this morning. It brought a tear to my eyes. I immediately thought of Anne's favourite bird, because you might remember she actually did say that she loved owls. They can't help themselves. I wouldn't mind, but this nasty to Nigel Farage and the Reform Party all started after the May the 7th election, says Anthony. They saw what happened and panicked and thought, oh God, they really could win the general election. Now we get a pile-on by all three of the other parties, all with the same agenda. Has anyone checked out the Labour Party cabinet ministers? They all seem to be worth millions. How did Rachel Reeves, Angela Rayner, David Lammy, the list just goes on. Andy Burnham and his wife's business, how did she win the contract for her business? All should be investigated. Anyone else who thinks the same, let's make it for every one of them, just for fairness. Well, this is what I say. You know, it's all very well for, I mean, I'm all for journalists doing stories on political parties, but if you're going to start exposing hypocrisy and or greed and or money, you've got to do it to everybody, haven't you? 10 o'clock is the witching hour, time for Kelvin Mackenzie over on UK Live Online. I'll be popping over there to say hello to him. And of course, coming up later on, it will be Mark Littlewood with his World Cupper show ahead of the England game tonight, which goes out at 8 o'clock. I'll be on the World Cupper show, I think, tomorrow. And I'll see you tomorrow morning.
And Liz Truss is in with Kelvin at the moment.
Oh, is she?
Yeah.
So Liz Truss is in with Kelvin. Brilliant. And go check that out right now. And I'll see you tomorrow morning at 7.
Why don't you relax and be a bit more MG? That would be a triumph.